Book 6, The Book of Fate, Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain, page 437. The mother has said that Savitri is a mantra for the transformation of the world. Try and understand what that means. It is a mantra for the transformation of the world. So what we are reading is something that creates a vibration, is a kind of a mantric verse that can transform the world. This is something that perhaps will only be understood 200-300 years from today, because very few people know the power of Savitri or even read it. So we ended with Canto 1, where Savitri says, the end, "For I know now," she says this to Narad and to her father, "for I know now why my spirit came on earth, and who I am, and who he is I love. I have looked at him from my immortal self. I have seen God smile at me in Satyavan. I have seen the eternal in a human face." So it ends with Ashwapati, the Queen Mother, Narad and Savitri. And except for Savitri, all of them kept quiet and looked into the eyes of fate. Next canto, Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain. A silence sealed the irrevocable decree, the word of fate that fell from heavenly lips, fixing a doom no power could ever reverse, unless heaven's will itself could change its course. So a silence that met with Savitri's words sealed the irrevocable decree. Decree what Narad spoke. He, from his heavenly lips, he spoke the word of fate, fixing a doom no power could ever reverse, unless heaven's will itself could change its course. Or so it seemed. Yet from the silence rose a voice that questioned changeless destiny, a will that strove against the immutable will. So please note the two wills. One is with a small w, and the immutable will is with a capitalized W. Now here you see a lot of Sri Aurobindo using the word will, and we spoke about that last time. The importance of will, the power of will, and how if the will is attached to the psychic power, psychic being within us, it has a different potency. So one voice that questioned changeless destiny, a will that strove against the immutable will. A mother's heart had heard the fateful speech that rang like a sanction to the call of death, and came like a chill close to life and hope. Yet hope sank down like an extinguished fire. She felt, who felt? Queen Mother. She felt the leaden, inevitable hand invade the secrecy of her guarded soul, and smite with sudden pain its still content, and the empire of her hard-won quietude. So, and she felt the leaden, inevitable hand invade the secrecy of her guarded soul, and smite with sudden pain its still content, and the empire of her hard-won quietude. Awhile she fell to the level of human mind, a field of mortal grief and nature's law. So even the Queen Mother, Savitri's mother, was not an ordinary mortal. She too had won her peace. She was also living in a deeper inner quietude and peace. But after listening to Savitri, her mind fell to the level of the human mind, and became a field of mortal grief, and obeyed nature's law. She bore the common lot of men, and felt what common hearts endure in time. Voicing earth's question to the inscrutable power, the queen now turned to the still immobile seer. Assailed by the discontent in nature's depths, partner in the agony of dumb-driven things, and all the misery, all the ignorant cry, passionate like sorrow, questioning heaven, she spoke. Lending her speech to the surface soul on earth, she uttered the suffering in the world's dumb heart, and man's revolt against his ignorant fate. So now the Queen Mother, who has come down to the human level, speaks, passionate like sorrow, questioning heaven, she spoke. And she lends her speech to the surface soul, like an ordinary human mother would speak. She uttered the suffering in the world's dumb heart, and man's revolt against his ignorant fate. The Queen Mother addresses Narad and says, O seer in the earth's strange twine-natured life, by what pitiless adverse necessity, or what cold freak of a Creator's will, by what random accident or governed chance, that shaped a rule out of fortuitous steps, made destiny from an hour's emotion, came into the unreadable mystery of time, the direr mystery of grief and pain. So she asked Narad, by what random accident or governed chance, that shaped a rule out of fortuitous steps, made destiny from an hour's emotion, came into the unreadable mystery of time, the direr mystery of grief and pain. Where is this law of grief and pain come from, she asked Narad. Is it thy God who made this cruel law? Is it your God who made this cruel law of grief and pain? Or some disastrous power has marred his work? Or has some disastrous power marred God's work? And he stands helpless, defend or save. A fatal seed was sown in life's false start, when evil twinned with good on earthly soil. Then first appeared the malady of mind, its pang of thought, its quest for the aim of life. It twisted into forms of good and ill, the frank simplicity of the animal's acts. It turned the straight path hewn by the body's gods, followed the zigzag of the uncertain course of life that wanders, seeking for its aim, in the pale starlight falling from thought's skies. Its guides the unsure idea, the wavering will. So when mind came into life, the Queen Mother notes, it was then that evil twinned with good on earthly soil. Why? Because it was the malady of the mind, the pang of thought, the quest for the aim of life, that twisted forms in the frank simplicity of the animal's acts. And then it turned the straight path hewn by the body's gods, because till then, before mind, it was life and instinct, spontaneous, that ruled the animal life. It made the straight path hewn by the body's gods, followed the zigzag of the uncertain course of life that wanders, seeking for its aim. So it was this seeking for an aim in life that actually brought this problem, the Queen Mother is telling Narad. In the pale starlight falling from thought's skies, its guides, the unsure idea, the wavering will. Lost was the instinct's safe identity. So lost was the instinct's safe identity, because the instinct has a certain surety and safety, because it is sure in its path. It follows a certain spontaneous law, which is lost when the mind intervenes with its aims and its wanting to know and wanting to be. So, lost was the instinct's safe identity, with the arrow point of being's inmost sight, marred the sure steps of nature's simple walk, and truth and freedom in the growing soul. Out of some ageless innocence and peace, privilege of souls not yet betrayed to birth, cast down to suffer on this hard, dangerous earth, our life was born in pain and with a cry. So the Queen Mother notes that when the souls come from some wonderful plane of innocence and peace, and when they enter into birth, they are cast down to suffer on this hard, dangerous earth, and even their life is born, when they are born, when a child is born, it is born in pain and with a cry. It begins its life crying. Although earth nature welcomes heaven's breath, inspiring matter with the will to live, although earth nature welcomes heaven's breath, inspiring matter with the will to live, 1,000 ills assail the mortal's hours and wear away the natural joy of life. Our bodies are an engine cunningly made, but for all its parts as cunningly are planned, contrived ingeniously with demon skill, its apt, inevitable heritage of mortal danger and peculiar pain, its payment of the tax of time and fate, its way to suffer and its way to die. This is the ransom of our high estate, the sign and stamp of our humanity, a grisly company of maladies. So this is the sign and stamp of our humanity, this payment of the tax of time and fate, this 1,000 ills that assail our mortal hours and wear away the natural joy of life. And then she says, what is humanity? What is man? What is the soul? What are we on earth? She's describing human life now. Very, very interesting paragraph. So what is humanity? What is the nature of ourselves? A grisly company. What does grisly mean? Anyone? A grisly company of maladies. So not dark. Yeah, grisly has many words to it, but you can check the exact meaning on your mobiles. A grisly company of maladies means illnesses. Come, licensed lodgers into man's bodily house. So what is our human nature and state? Firstly, we have lodged like tenants. You give your house on rent. So who have we given our human house on rent to? Different illnesses, maladies. We have some or the other issue or problem or some kind of illness harboring in our body. This is the Queen Mother speaking. She's speaking about very ordinary human life, mortal life, which you see all around you. Everybody has some problem or the other, or no? Someone suffers from indigestion, someone suffers from gas, someone suffers from high blood pressure, diabetes, someone suffers from pain in their body. So all of us have some issue with ourselves. So that's what the Queen Mother is saying, that this is the sign and stamp of our humanity. What is it? A grisly company. Who do we give our bodies company to? A grisly company of maladies. Means maladies is like issues, problems, maladies. This is the ransom of our high estate, the sign and stamp of our humanity. A grisly company of maladies come, licensed lodgers into man's bodily house, purveyors of death and torturers of life. So, what are these licensed lodgers that come into our bodily house? None of you found the meanings of the two words? Horrific, okay. And maladies, problems, illnesses, all of that. So, come licensed lodgers into man's bodily house, purveyors of death and torturers of life. What are these wonderful tenants that we allow into our house? They are purveyors of death and torturers of our life. No, don't they torture us? So they are something you will also allow them to come into your body? If all of us have some problem or illness, or if you have them, this is the normal nature of they come into our bodies, and they are purveyors of death and torturers of life in the malignant hollows of the world. So malignant hollows, please note the word malignant. In the malignant hollows of the world, in its subconscious caverned passages, ambushed they lie, waiting their hour to leap. So these tenants that we have in the house, they lie quietly crouched in our bodies, and they wait for the coronavirus to leap out into us. So you see, we have these illnesses that are lodged already there, these germs. So this is what the Queen Mother is telling, and this is a fact. At one level of humanity and of nature, this is happening. Don't we see that? In different forms. Ambushed they lie, waiting their hour to leap, surrounding with danger the seized city of life. So the city of life here is the human city, the body. Admitted into the citadel of man's days, once they admitted into the citadel, into the house, the palace of man's days, our body is being compared or likened to a citadel, like a house, a building. Ambushed they lie. Who lie? The maladies. Ambushed they lie, waiting their hour to leap, surrounding with danger the seized city of life. Admitted into the citadel of man's days, they mine his force and maim or suddenly kill. So what do? They mime his force. What does mime his force mean? They undermine, Mime means that they reduce, They reduce his force and maim, surrounding with danger the sea city of life. Admitted into the citadels of man's days, they mime his force and maim or suddenly kill. So they cut or kill or hurt or undermine his force. Maim is inflicting a wound, okay. So they ourselves within us, lethal forces nurse. So we ourselves, the Queen Mother says, within us, we nurse lethal forces. We don't need to invite them from outside us. They're already within us. Ourselves within us, lethal forces nurse. We make of our own enemies our guests. We invite them in. We make of our own enemies maladies and problems and illnesses and issues. We make them into wonderful guests to enter into our own house, our own building of life. So out of their holes like beasts, they creep and gnaw the chords of the divine musician's lyre, till frayed and thin the music dies away, or crashing snaps with a last tragic note. So these guests that we invite, who are our own enemies, they come out of their holes. I told you they hide. They come out of their holes like beasts and creep and gnaw. Gnaw means eat up. The chords of the divine musician's lyre. Now what does he mean? Who is he referring to? The chords of the divine musician's lyre. Till frayed and thin the music dies away, or crashing snaps with a last tragic note. Life, our life. They gnaw, they creep into our life and they wear it away, so that our music, which is our life force, wanes away and slowly dies. You understand the prana shakti? All that we are is like a fort beset. All that we arrive to be alters like a dream. All that we strive to be alters like a dream in the grey sleep of matter's ignorance. Mind suffers lamed by the world's disharmony and the unloveliness of human things, a treasure misspent or cheaply, fruitlessly sold in the bazaar of a blind destiny, a gift of priceless value from time's gods, lost or mislaid in an uncaring world. Life is a marvel mist and art gone wry, a seeker in a dark and obscure place, an ill-armed warrior facing dreadful odds, an imperfect worker given a baffling task, an ignorant judge of problems, ignorance made, its heavenward flights reach closed and keyless gates, its glorious outbursts peter out in Maya. On nature's gifts to man a curse was laid. So, on nature's gifts, what nature gave to man, there was a curse that nature laid on all the gifts it gave to humanity, to us. All walks inarmed by its own opposite. So whatever gift that nature gave us, everything was given with its opposite. So if you had joy, you had pain. If you had death, you had life. If you had health, you had illness. So everything was given with its opposite. Error is the comrade of our mortal thought, and falsehood lurks in the deep bosom of truth. So here, these are the opposites. Error is the comrade of our mortal thought. With our thought is also the thought itself has, or the mind itself has a imperfection in it of thinking incorrectly, which is meaning error is when you make a mistake or when you are unable to understand something. Error is the comrade, means the friend of our mortal thought. And falsehood lurks in the deep bosom of truth. And falsehood is deeply inside the bosom of truth. Sin poisons with its vivid flowers of joy. Sin poisons with its vivid flowers of joy, or leaves a red scar burnt across the soul. Virtue is a grey bondage and a jail. So even virtue is a grey bondage and a jail. At every step is laid for us a snare. So at every step there is a test. There is a trap laid for us. Who? For us, meaning for humanity, for human beings. At every step is laid for us a snare, alien to reason and the Spirit's light. Our fount of action from a darkness wells. Even the fountain of action, that means when we act from a darkness wells. That means from an ignorance. Even our actions come from a ignorance that dogs our actions. At every step is laid for us a snare, alien to reason and the Spirit's light. Our fount of action from a darkness wells. In ignorance and nescience are our roots. A growing register of calamities. So what instead? We have a growing register. Like a register, you write down the books and what you write in a register. The human register is a register of calamities. A growing register of calamities is the past's account, the future's book of fate. The centuries pile man's follies and man's crimes upon the countless crowd of nature's ills. As if the world's stone load was not enough, a crop of miseries obstinately is sown. Just see the wonderful imagery that Sri Aurobindo is putting here. A crop of miseries. You can see like a wheat crop. Crop, it's an agricultural term. A crop of what? Miseries is sown. As though it was not enough that we had nature's ills in us and all the issues and maladies and problems and conflicts and darkness and inconscience. If that was not enough, she said, on top of that, what happens? She says, as if the world's stone load was not enough. A crop of miseries obstinately sown by his own hand. Whose hand? The human. Our hand. We grow our own crop of miseries. Okay? By our own hands. By his own hand in the furrows of the gods. So you know the furrows in a field where you grow the crop? In the kheti, you know. So we also, in the furrows of the gods also, we grow a wonderful crop of miseries. So see the wonderful image. Next time you see a field and you go by, you see the crop, you can see, this is what we do. We grow our own crops there. Same way. The vast, increasing, tragic harvest reaped. So now you've grown your crop, what are you going to reap? You're going to reap the fruits of the crop that you've grown. The vast, increasing, tragic harvest reaped from old misdeeds buried by oblivious time. So this wonderful harvest is reaped from old misdeeds buried by oblivious time. Old actions, old mistakes, old, what should I say, misdeeds. This is the right word. Deeds are actions. So when earth, a crop of miseries, obstinately is sown by his own hand in the furrows of the gods, the vast, increasing, tragic harvest reaped from old misdeeds buried by oblivious time, he walks by his own choice into hell's trap. He walks by his own choice into hell's trap. This mortal creature is his own worst foe. So human beings, we ourselves are our own worst enemy. His science is an artificer of doom. He ransacks earth for means to harm his kind. He slays his happiness and others' good. Nothing has he learned from time and its history. You've heard this often, history repeats itself. So humanity and we have learned nothing from the past. We keep repeating the same misdeeds, the same mistakes. Now you see, we are all enjoying the nature and the birds and the lack of pollution. But as soon as the lockdown is over, now we have learned nothing from this. We will continue. Pollution will start, the birds will run away, the animals will die and so on. And nature will suffer and the climate will also become harsh. So, the same way we continue war after war, making atom bomb after atom bomb. We kill each other. We continue doing the same thing, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Now, when we remember starting from the ancient times, we have not learned anything from history. This is what the Queen Mother is saying. And at one level, what her observations are about humanity and about human life are true. Nothing in Savitri is untrue. There are different states of consciousness. She is describing the ordinary human mental state. Humanity as we are in this world. So, he slays his happiness and others' good. Nothing has he learned from time and its history. Even as of old, in the raw youth of time, when earth ignorant ran on the highways of fate, old forms of evil cling to the world's soul. War making naught, the sweet smiling calm of life, battle and rapine means rape, battle and rapine, ruin and massacre, are still the fierce pastimes of man's warring tribes. See how beautifully Sri Aurobindo describes what we are doing. Old forms of evil cling to the world's soul, war making naught, the sweet, smiling calm of life. Battle and rapine, ruin and massacre are still the fierce pastimes of man's warring tribes. An idiot hour destroys what centuries made. An idiot hour. What do you think he's referring here to? Hiroshima? An idiot hour destroys what centuries made. His wanton rage of frenzied hate lays low the beauty and greatness by his genius wrought, and the mighty output of a nation's toil. All he has achieved he drags to the precipice. To the, what is precipice? Edge of the cliff to fall. All he has achieved, he drags to the precipice. His grandeur he turns to an epic of doom and fall. So all the greatness that he has, he turns into a wonderful epic story of doom and fall. His grandeur he turns to an epic of doom and fall. His littleness crawls content through squalor and mud. His littleness crawls content through squalor and mud. He calls heaven's retribution on his head and wallows in his self-made misery. So what does this mean? Wallows in his self-made misery. We have a tendency to wallow. Wallow means to drown, to lie in mud. Yeah. So we enjoy lying in our own misery. Do you understand? We enjoy it. We like you roll in mud and you enjoy. No, this is an enjoyment we have. We love to be victims Yeah, swine activities like pigs. We wallow, not in mud. We wallow in our own misery. We also dwell on our misery, on our misfortune, on our problems, on our grief, on our, what should I say? Oh, mujhe kya ho gaya? Abhi kya ho gaya? And you carry on. You see all these old women, oh, they even articulate it. You hear them on television and you hear them in your families. And they wallow in it, love to talk about it, think about it, cry about it. And oh, this is, I'm in such a pain and this has happened and my daughter-in-law has done this to me and my so-and-so has done that time, and you pick up the phone and talk to somebody. And so, they love it. And we tend to, suppose something happens to us, we also tend to, keep aggravating it and thinking about it and wallowing in it. We enjoy the misery so much, human beings. So whenever you hear all these stories of this thing, best thing to tell them is to keep quiet. I'm putting off the phone if you continue one more second. So, and only thing is that the older generation tends to articulate it. The younger generation does it more mentally. But we all have this tendency, not fake. This is what he's saying. We enjoy it. This is human nature. They're not fake. They actually believe it and they actually wallow in it. Like, it's all a question of your attitude and your mind. If you wish to see a glass half full or half empty. Now, when you start enjoying the half emptiness of everything and you keep focusing on that, half emptiness of anything, then you will wallow and enjoy it. But doesn't mean that the glass, the rest of the water is not there. It's there, but you don't see it. You only see the empty part. You don't see what you have. Yeah, nice, complaining nature. Okay. He calls heaven's retribution on his head and wallows in his self-made misery. So first he calls heaven's retribution on his head. First he calls upon all the problems on himself by his own actions. And then he nicely wallows in it. That means lies down in the mud of his misery. As part author of the cosmic tragedy. So he's also a part author of the cosmic tragedy. His will conspires with death and time and fate. His brief appearance on the enigmaed earth ever recurs but brings no high result. To this wanderer through the aeon rings of God that shut his life in their vast longevity, his soul's wide search and ever returning hopes pursue the useless orbit of their course in a vain repetition of lost toils across a track of soon forgotten lives. So see, if you look at the wonderful way that the Queen Mother has explained and has gone into the psychological nature of the human mind and of the human being, you can see that she's not an ordinary Queen Mother. Savitri's mother has also a deep inner insight of the way the human world is made, and humanity and nature, human nature is. And so it's quite interesting to see the accurateness of her observations. His will conspires with death and time and fate. His is man, human beings. His brief appearance on the enigmaed earth ever recurs but brings no high result. Keeps coming, death and rebirth and death, but brings no high result. To this wanderer through the aeon rings of God that shut his life in their vast longevity, his soul's wide search and ever-returning hopes pursue the useless orbit of their course in a vain repetition of lost toils across a track of soon-forgotten lives. Across a track of soon-forgotten lives, so all is an episode in a meaningless tale. Why is it all? And wherefore are we here? So here the Queen Mother questions Narad and says, but why is all this happening? Why is this here? Why is it all? And why are we here? What are we here for? And wherefore are we here? If to some being of eternal bliss, it is our spirit's destiny to return, or some still impersonal height of endless calm, since that we are, and out of that we came, whence rose the strange and sterile interlude, lasting in vain interminable time, who willed to form or feign a universe in the cold and endless emptiness of space? Or if these beings must be, and their brief lives, what need had the soul of ignorance and tears? Whence rose the call for sorrow and for pain? Or all came helplessly without a cause? What power forced the immortal spirit to birth? The eternal witness, once of eternity, a deathless sojourner, mid transient scenes, he camps in life's half-lit obscurity, amid the debris of his thoughts and dreams, or who persuaded it to fall from bliss and forfeit its immortal privilege? So here the Queen is asking lots of questions to Narad. She's saying, please explain to me, what is the meaning? Why was this earth created? Who brought the universe, not only the earth, but the entire universe? Who gave it a form? How did the universe begin? And then in the universe, who made the cold and endless emptiness of space? Who willed it to form or feign a universe in the cold and endless emptiness of space? Or if these beings must be, and their brief lives, what need of the soul of ignorance and tears? Even if suppose a being came and made the universe, and there needed to be, what was the need for bringing in ignorance and tears and pain into life and into the earth and into the universe? Who brought this principle in? Why was the principle of pain and ignorance introduced into the earth consciousness? This is what she's asking. Whence rose the call for sorrow and for pain? When did the need for sorrow and pain come about? Or whence rose the call? Who called for it? Or all came helplessly without a cause? Or are you trying to tell me all of this happened without any cause? It just happened because it happened. What power forced the immortal spirit to birth? And then on top of that, you've made a universe, you've introduced the law of ignorance, you've introduced the law of pain and sorrow, and then on top of that, you brought an immortal soul into earth, into a body, into life, and you've brought it down on earth. Why? Why was this immortal soul taken away from its immortal home and brought into this universe and into this earth? These are the questions she's asking. Who laid on it the ceaseless will to live, a wanderer in this beautiful, sorrowful world, and bear its load of joy and grief and love? Or if no being watches the works of time, what hard impersonal necessity compels the vain toil of brief living things? So if you're saying there is no higher being, no universal God or being that watches the works of time, then what hard impersonal necessity compelled the vain toil of brief living things? A great illusion then has built the stars. But where then is the soul's security, its poise in the circling of unreal suns? Or else it is a wanderer from its own, or she's constantly asking and suggesting different hypotheses. Or else is it a wanderer from its home, who strayed into a blind alley of time and chance and finds no issue from a meaningless world? Or where begins and ends illusion's reign? Where does illusion begin and end? Perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream. Perhaps even the soul is a dream. Perhaps there is no immortal soul. Perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream. Aren't these thoughts that come to all of us? Perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream, eternal self, a fiction sensed in trance. So there the Queen Mother stops. These are all the questions. Now Narad replies to each and every question of us. Then, after a silence, Narad made reply. Tuning his lips to earthly sound, he spoke, and something now of the deep sense of fate waited the fragile hints of mortal speech. So, in his words was the deep sense of fate that weighed his words, weighed the fragile hints of mortal speech. His forehead shone with vision, solemnized, turned to a tablet of supernal thoughts, as if characters of an unwritten tongue had left in its breath the inscriptions of the gods. Bare in that light, time toiled, his unseen works detected, the broad-flung, far-seeing schemes, unfinished, which his aeoned flight unrolls, were mapped already in that world-wide look. So Narad replies to the Queen Mother, Savitri's mother, and says, "Was then the sun a dream, because there is night? Hidden in the mortal's heart, the eternal lives. He lives secret in the chamber of thy soul. A light shines there, nor pain nor grief can cross. A darkness stands between thyself and him. Thou canst not hear or feel the marvelous guest. Thou canst not see the beatific Son. O Queen, thy thought is a light of the ignorance. Its brilliant curtain hides from thee God's face. It illumes a world born from the inconscience, but hides the immortal's meaning in the world. Thy mind's light hides from the eternal's thought. Thy heart's hopes hide from thee the eternal's will. Earth's joys shut from thee the immortal's bliss. So very important. This is the psychological state that we as human beings are in. Our mind's light hide from us the eternal's thought. Our heart's hopes hide from us the eternal's will. And even all the earthly joys, all the earthly desires, the little joys we experience, that also shuts us from the immortal's bliss. And because of that reason, because our mind hides eternal's thought, our heart's hopes hide the eternal's will, and the earth's little joys and pleasures hide and shut us off from the immortal's bliss. Therefore the need of a dark, intruding God. Thence rose the need of a dark, intruding God. The world's dread teacher, the creator pain. So who is the dark, intruding God? It is the teacher of the world, the teacher that is dreaded by the world. Why? By human beings, because it is pain who is the teacher. So we don't like pain, do we? How many of us run towards pain? How many of us love to experience pain? Why not? Ask yourself, what's wrong in feeling pain? So think about it. Next time, go towards it, see how it feels. Thence rose the need of a dark, intruding God, the world's dread teacher, the creator pain. So pain is called the creator. You know why? The world's dread teacher, the creator pain. Where ignorance is, their suffering too must come. Thy grief is a cry of darkness to the light. Pain was the first born of the inconscience, which was thy body's dumb original base. The original base of our body was the inconscience, and the first child of inconscience was pain, is pain. Already slept there, pain's subconscious shape. a shadow in a shadowy, tenebrous womb, till life shall move, it waits to wake and be. So pain was already sleeping in our subconscious material base. But it only woke up and only wakes up when life enters. Until then, it is asleep. Okay? So therefore, when a child is born, what happens? Life enters the child. So what is the first thing the child does? It cries out in pain. So pain enters when life is born. Pain was the firstborn of the inconscience, which was thy body's dumb original base. Already slept there pain's subconscious shape, a shadow in a shadowy tenebrous womb. Till life shall move, it waits to wake and be. In one call with joy came forth the dreadful power. In the same call, with joy and pain, came the dreadful power. In life's breast it was born, hiding its twin. So joy and pain are twins, born together in the same womb. So in life, both are hidden and both take birth together. In life's breast it was born, hiding its twin. But pain came first. Then only joy could be. But out of the two twins, the firstborn was pain. And then only because of pain, joy could be. Why? Pain ploughed the first hard ground of the world drowse. Because pain is the creator that ploughs the hard ground of the entire world's sleepy state. And in the same way of our own sleepy, tamasic state. So when we fall asleep, when we begin to become self-satisfied, then we get a nice punch from pain. Wake up. So, but pain came first, then only joy could be. Pain ploughed the first hard ground of the world drowse. By pain a spirit started from the clod. So it was pain that brought forward in the clod. What does a clod mean? Piece of earth that is inanimate. Inanimate. By pain a spirit started from the clod. By pain life stirred in the subliminal deep, interned, submerged, hidden in matter's trance, awoke to itself the dreamer, sleeping mind. Because pain, the creator, stirs up, wakes up life in the subliminal deep of matter. It wakes matter from its trance and awakes it, and awakes also the sleeping mind. It made a visible realm out of its dreams. It drew its shapes from the subconscious depths, then turned to look upon the world it had made. So pain draws its shapes from the subconscious depths and then turns around to see what it has made. By pain and joy, the bright and tenebrous twins, the inanimate world perceived its sentient soul. Else had the inconscient never suffered change. So if there was no pain and joy, the inconscient, which is the inanimate, would never have changed. Life would never have entered into matter, into the darkness. The darkness would have been all-engulfing. There'd only be darkness and darkness and darkness and darkness if there was no pain and no joy. Then Sri Aurobindo's most famous words, Narad says, "Pain is the hammer of the gods to break, a dead resistance in the mortal's heart, his slow inertia as of living stone. Pain is the hammer of the gods to break, a dead resistance in man's mortal heart. Pain is the hammer of the gods to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart, his slow inertia as of living stone. If the heart were not forced to want and weep, if the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content, at ease, and never thought to exceed the human start, and never learned to climb towards the sun. If pain had not come into life, life would never have woken up, and the heart would never have wanted or wept or aspired. The soul would never have woken up. It would have been asleep. So pain is the great creator. That's why the creator pain. It has created everything. So this earth is full of labor, packed with pain. Throes of an endless birth coerce her still. So if you got into the habit, if we got into the habit of bearing and not only enduring, but enjoying the process of pain in ourselves, where we could actually see that pain was coming to us because we needed to change something in ourselves, something in our, could be the body, could be the mind, could be the emotions, could be the ego, whatever it might be. It's different for everybody and it changes. If you could see and take pain as a teacher, if we could take pain as our teacher and see its creative power in pushing us towards a greater progress and change, then we would not run away from pain. We would welcome it. And the moment you welcome pain, do you know what happens to pain? Anyone tried it? I'll tell you. Nobody's tried it here? What happens to pain when you welcome it? Yes, joy. Immediately, when you welcome pain, you experience joy. Tremendous joy. It is a very, very, very strange phenomenon. But you have to welcome it. It turns, because joy and pain are the two twins. See what Sri Aurobindo is saying here. They are born together. They're twins. And the first is pain, push you towards experiencing joy. So if you welcome pain, you experience joy. To the level in which you can welcome pain, to that level your body will experience joy, or your mind will experience joy. So, those who were even in, I have heard those who have been in terrible circumstances, which you and I cannot even imagine, and have had this capacity of bearing pain and receiving it without any reaction from the mind and emotions, have experienced ecstasy, have changed pain into joy, and have gone into a deep yogic process and realization. Many prisoners in solitary confinement have had this experience. Many in the concentration camp have had this experience. Because those are extreme conditions. But what about our pain, little pains and little hurts and desperations we are constantly experiencing? Let's try it at this very limited level. So that is why Savitri is a mantra for what? For the transformation of the world. Where have you read this before? Which literature? Which book has ever told you anything like this before? So let's take that. This earth is full of labor, packed with pain. Throes of an endless birth coerce her still. The centuries end, the ages vainly pass, and yet the Godhead in her is not born. The ancient mother faces all with joy, calls for the ardent pang, the grandiose thrill, for with pain and labor all creation comes. So all creation comes. With pain and labor, all creation comes. So when you have to do your report writing and you are complaining away, well, if you don't have that difficulty or that pressure on you, you will not be able to write a report or create a new report or create something new. For all creation, any kind of creation, from the smallest to the largest, pain is necessary. For with pain and labor, all creation comes. You see what happens to the mother when she gives birth to her child? For with pain and labor, all creation comes. This earth is full of the anguish of the gods. Ever they travail, driven by time's goad, and strive to work out the eternal will, and shape the life divine in mortal forms. So this anguish comes first from the gods. They have themselves gone through it. They are not putting us through anything that they have not done themselves. This earth is full of the anguish of the gods. Ever they travail, ever they work, driven by time's goad, and strive to work out the eternal will and shape the life divine in mortal forms. His will must be worked out in human breasts against the evil that rises from the gulfs, against the world's ignorance and its obstinate strength, against the stumblings of man's pervert will, against the deep folly of his human mind, against the blind reluctance of his heart. So his will must be worked out. Whose will? The Supreme's will must be worked out in human dress, in human humanity, against the world's ignorance, against the stumblings of man's perverted will, against the deep errors and follies of human mind, against the blind reluctance of his human heart. The spirit is doomed to pain till man is free. So the spirit is doomed to pain till man is free. This is what Narad is telling Savitri's mother. That what are you saying? Why are you crying so much? This is the law of the universe, the law of nature. There is a clamor of battle, a tramp, a march, a cry arises like a moaning sea, a desperate laughter under the blows of death, a doom of blood and sweat and toil and tears. Men die that man can live and God be born. Men die that man can live and God be born. An awful silence watches tragic time. Pain is the hand of nature, sculpturing men to greatness. And inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty an unwilling mold. Implacable in the passion of their will, lifting the hammers of titanic toil, the demiurges of the universe work. They shape with giant strokes their own. Their sons are marked with their enormous stamp of fire. So what is Narad saying here? Pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness. And this pain shapes with giant strokes the demiurges of the universe work. They shape with giant strokes their own. Their suns are marked with the enormous stamp of fire. Although the shaping God's tremendous touch is torture, unbearable to mortal nerves, the fiery spirit grows in strength within and feels a joy in every titan pang. So although it is this pain, this tremendous, this is the shaping God. Who is the shaping God here? Pain. Although the shaping God's tremendous touch is torture unbearable to mortal nerves, to our human capacity to bear it, our mortal nerves, yet, he says, though the outer nature of man finds it unbearable, the spirit within grows in strength and feels a joy in every titan pang. He who would save himself lives bare and calm. He who would save the race must share its pain. So he who would save himself lives bare and calm. If you notice that there are two ways. Either work for your own salvation, for your own mukti, for your own moksha, for your own nirvana, and you will then live bare and calm. You will be indifferent to the world and you will live in your own samadhi. But he who wants to save the race, wants to save not just himself, but the whole world, the whole race of humanity, must bear its pain. So there is no way of getting out of it. So Sri Aurobindo, as you know, his yoga and Mother's yoga was a yoga of life transformation, transformation of the race, transformation of the world. So in that sense, they were not exempt from the pain and suffering. In fact, they had to undergo far more, 1,000,000, Savitri, 1,000 gaping wounds, Sri Aurobindo talks about. And he talks about how incredible the pain they had to go through. The mother's pain, she says, the Holocaust of the mother. So it's like, it's worse than 1,000 concentration camps. So that was the pain they had to go through. That is what is being indicated here. He who would save himself lives bare and calm. He who would save the race must share its pain. This he shall know who obeys that grandiose urge. The great who came to save this suffering world and rescue out of time's shadow and the law must pass beneath the yoke of grief and pain. They are caught by the wheel that they had hoped to break. On their shoulders they must bear man's load of fate. Heaven's riches they bring, their sufferings count the price, or they pay the gift of knowledge with their lives. The Son of God, born as the Son of Man, you know who he's referring to here? The Son of God, born as the Son of Man, has drunk the bitter cup, owned Godhead's debt, the debt the eternal owes to the fallen kind. His will has bound to death and struggling life that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score. The eternal suffers in a human form. So the eternal, here is a mention of the avatars, the avataric, or those who have come to transform this race, whether a Christ or a Buddha or a Ramakrishna, whoever. They must bear what? That they must suffer deeply in the human form. They have to bear the debt. Now is the debt paid, and they have to sometimes suffer far more than human beings. The debt the eternal owes to the fallen kind, his will has bound to death and struggling life, that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score. the Eternal suffers in a human form. See, the Eternal does not have to take a human form. It is not necessary. They choose to take so. They choose to come into this world, to bear the pain. The Eternal suffers in a human form. He has signed salvation's testament with his blood. He has opened the doors of his undying peace. The deity compensates, the creatures claim, the Creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven. He has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. It is finished, the dread mysterious sacrifice offered by God's martyred body for the world. Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot. He carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed. His escort is the curses of the crowd. Insult and jeer are his rights' acknowledgement. 2 thieves slain with him mock his mighty death. He has trod with bleeding brow the Saviour's way. This is imagery, of course, of Christ when he's taken to the cross and crucified. And here, through this imagery and through the last paragraph, what Narad is saying is that pain is the great creator God that has come down to transform the nature of man. But however, it is actually the Eternal who suffers the most in humanity, in us, in man. Because the Eternal has also come down into the body as our soul or the psychic. And it is the Eternal that suffers in this mortality. So, through that, he says that the Eternal and the Divine has always been mocked and ridiculed and unbelieved through ages. And then he takes the whole imagery of Christ. So, I'll read that again. The Creator bears the law of pain and death. The Creator, you know. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love, whose love? The incarnate God's. Incarnate, meaning that God that is incarnated in man. Not God in some outside heaven, far off beatitude, but in life, in us, in each human being. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven. He has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. So it is this love and this light and this life that the incarnate God who has come down on earth. So here it is the incarnate God is the avatar in Christ, in the Buddha, in Muhammad, in all the various manifestations. And also the incarnate God is the psychic being in us. So the dark account of mortal ignorance, it is finished, the dread mysterious sacrifice. So it is finished, the dread mysterious sacrifice offered by God's martyred body for the world. Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot. Now, you can just, anyone would like to reference these 2 words? Please look them up and tell me what they mean. There's a reference, there's something that Sri Aurobindo here is alluding to. Is of course some famous, I think it's to do with the Christian faith. Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot. He carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed. So, who carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed? The incarnate God, that is through that who has martyred his body for the world, that divine that has entered into matter, into life, into the universe. There are many names. If you don't believe in God, you can call it evolutionary force. He carries a cross on which man's soul is nailed. His escort is the curses of the crowd. Insult and jeer are his rights' acknowledgement. 2 thieves slain with him mock his mighty death. He has trod with bleeding brow the Saviour's way. He who has found his identity with God pays with the body's death his soul's vast light. So we've seen through the ages that mostly those who have come down or have identified themselves and have realized the divine, who have become one with the universal wisdom, the universal divine, are also those that have been most ostracized and ridiculed and sometimes put to death. So you've seen in the various people, whether it's Joan of Arc, Christ, whether it's the people in India, those that have pure of soul often suffer much more than those that go the other way. His knowledge immortal triumphs by his death. So it is through his death that people after that begin to recognize him and recognize his godliness and his immortality. So his name lives on only after he dies, those that are identified with God. This is obviously a very clear symbolism of Christ and what happened to him. And as you know, the people who follow Christianity are 3/4 of this world, or half the world, I would say. So you can imagine all these so-called people, till Christ was alive and he was doing his works of charity and love, he was hated, he was ignored, he was not believed, he was called a heretic and a sham and a thief and a whatever. He was hanged for it. He was nailed to the cross. But after he died, all of the Europe, America, the whole world suddenly started worshipping him and made it a whole Christian church came after that. So this is it's actually a very sarcastic kind of way that the narrator, Narad, is speaking here. He's telling that this is the way that human beings are. They don't value people, they don't value the divine when they're there. After somebody goes away, then you start worshipping him. Here also, we put up all that photographs of people only after they die. And then we start thinking how wonderful and good they are. As long as they are alive, we only look at their faults. So, this is the human nature he is pointing to here. His knowledge immortal triumphs by his death. Hewn, quartered on the scaffold as he falls. His crucified voice proclaims, I am God. Yes, all is God. Peals back heaven's deathless call. The seed of Godhead sleeps in mortal hearts. The flower of Godhead grows on the world tree. So here again, Narad is explaining to the Queen Mother and saying that, look, the seed of Godhead, though there are avatars, there are those that identify and realize that Godhead in them, therefore are called avatars and vibhutis and so on. Yet, the Godhead is not only in them, it is in each one of us. The seed of Godhead is in the mortal form and in the universe. So, in a sense, what he's saying is that there's no point looking outward to another. Look within. Go within. You will see the divine in you and realize it. Yes, all is God. Peals back heaven's deathless call. The seed of Godhead sleeps in mortal hearts. But it sleeps. Sleep in us while it's awake in those who are so-called called seers and sages and avatars. But we, because it is asleep in us, we feel we are lesser, mortal. The seed of Godhead sleeps in mortal hearts. The flower of Godhead grows on the world tree. All shall discover God in self and things. But not only is God present in the self or in us, but God is also present around us, in every single leaf and pebble and stone And so, therefore, these words, the flower of Godhead grows on the world tree. All shall discover God in self and things. Things is referring to matter. But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. However, when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke. The yoke is the burden, the yoke. He came to unloose. He must become like man. He must carry man's nature. Otherwise, how will he be able to help man? He too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang, the pain that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? So therefore those who say, oh, because, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they were exceptional being, avatars, so on, therefore they could do what they did. That's not true. Each person, whether who has come to redeem and to help the evolutionary journey of the earth and of man, has to bear the human nature and go through the same pain, the same road that all of us go through. Otherwise he cannot help. So this idea that an avatar or a godlike being or those who have realized the divine are somehow exempt from pain, exempt from suffering, exempt from the terrible ordeal and the smallnesses that we go through is an incorrect idea. So here Narad is explaining. He says, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how should he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there, and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sins weigh on his thoughts. Its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and his powers beleaguer his tardy steps. The Titan adversary's clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites, he is stricken with the world's pain. 1,000,000 wounds gape in his secret heart. What happens to those who have come to lead humanity to a higher destiny? 1,000,000 wounds gape in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night. Antagonist forces crowd across his path. A siege, a combat is his inner life. Even worse may be the cost, direr the pain. His large identity and all harboring love shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. So those that are open and to the pain, all pain, we only feel our own pain. But those who have come to lead us in the evolutionary march, they feel the sorrow of all living things, not just human beings, but animals and plants. Every pain they have to bear and comes into their hearts. That's why he says they have 1,000 gaping wounds. That is how universalized their consciousness is. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. A dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief. So this cord of sympathy that he has so deep within him, a dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief and make all agony in all the worlds his own. Not just this world. He meets an ancient adversary force. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The weeping of the centuries visits his eyes. He wears the blood-glued, fiery centaur shirt. The poison of the world has stained his throat. So, through that one line, he brings up the image of Shiva and the poison of the world. So these, you've seen throughout time, you've seen whether it's the story in the Ramayana of Sri Ram, or in the Mahabharata, or Shiva, that this is part of their nature, to take in all suffering and pain, to universalize their consciousness and to bear everything. Otherwise, they cannot help man or humanity or even society to progress. So such is the lot that those who have come here down and have identified, have become one with the Godhead within and without, have to face. So it's not that they are leading a hunky-dory life and we are suffering. It's quite the opposite. You've heard what the mother has spoken about in the agenda, the kind of suffering and pain she had to go through. And those who could hear her down in the courtyard could hear her. Terrible, terrible anguish. So it is what they call is the Holocaust of the mother, the Holocaust of the Prakriti, of nature that has come in and bears the darkness and the suffering of the world. And that's not just now, it's through the ages and through all faiths and religions and through everything, through nature itself. The poison of the world has stained his throat in the marketplace of matter's capital, amidst the chafferings of the affair called life. He is tied to the stake of a perennial fire. He burns on an unseen original verge, that matter may be turned to spirit stuff. He is the victim in his own sacrifice, the immortal bound to earth's mortality, appearing and perishing on the roads of time, creates God's moment by eternity's beats. He dies that the world may be newborn and live, even if he escapes the fiercest fires, even if the world breaks not in a drowning sea, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned. So this is the law of sacrifice that nobody is exempt from, that nobody can get out of. All of us have to sacrifice, make sacred our lives. What is sacrifice? Make sacred our lives. And the divine, by example, through his instruments, does the same. He dies that the world may be newborn and live, even if he escapes the fiercest fires, even if the world breaks not in a drowning sea, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned. He must face the fight, the pang, who would conquer hell. A dark, concealed hostility is lodged in the human depths, in the hidden heart of time, that claims the right to change and mar God's work. A secret entity ambushes the world's march. It leaves a mark on thought and speech and act. It stamps stain and defect on all things done. Till it is slain, peace is forbidden on earth. So here Narad speaks of a very deep truth, absolute truth of the way the universe has been formed and the law of evolutionary earth. He says, listen very carefully and try and see. It's very mystical, it's occult, it's deep and profound. You have to understand it from something, an intuition within. It cannot be understood by the mind. So he says, a dark, concealed hostility is lodged in the human depths, in the hidden heart of time, that claims the right to change and mar God's work. A secret entity ambushes the world's march. It leaves a mark on thought and speech and act. It stamps stain and defect on all things done. Till it is slain, peace is forbidden on earth. So till this dark, concealed hostility that is lodged in the earth, in the world's march. It is lodged in us, in each human being. It is also lodged in the matter of earth. That dark hostility, till that is not dislodged, it will continue. No peace is ever going to come on earth. This idea of peace on earth is a chimera, is not going to happen. So this dark, concealed hostility that is lodged in the human depths and in the hidden heart of time, time with a capital T. What is time? Where is time? Is there time in space, or is there time only on earth? Where is time? What is time? Where does time come from? How does it function? A secret entity ambushes the world's march. So this secret entity, that is the hostility, it ambushes. What is ambushes? It stops. It ambushes it, the world's march. It keeps stopping the world's march. It keeps bringing it backward. Every progress made, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Something that keeps pushing us back. Every time we try and move forward, something pulls you back, doesn't it? That is what he's trying to refer to. It also happens on the human level, but it happens far more on the evolutionary level of time and earth. So it stamps stain and defect on all things done. Till it is slain, peace is forbidden on earth. So what is this concealed hostility? Now he says, there is no visible foe. You can't find it. You can't say, there it is standing there. Let me go and kill it or get rid of it or it will vanish. No. There is no visible foe, but the unseen is round us. But it is unseen. It is all around us. It's within us. It's around us. It's in matter. There is no visible foe, but the unseen is round us. Forces intangible besiege. Touches from alien realms. Thoughts not our own. Overtake us and compel the erring heart. Our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. An adversary force was born of old, invader of the life of mortal man. It hides from him the straight immortal path. A power came in to veil the eternal light. A power opposed to the eternal will. Diverts the messages of the infallible word. Contorts the contours of the cosmic plan. A whisper lures to evil the human heart. A whisper lures to evil the human heart. It seals up wisdom's eyes, the soul's regard. It is the origin of our suffering here. It binds earth to calamity and pain. This all must conquer who would bring down God's peace. This hidden foe lodged in the human breast. Man must overcome or miss his higher fate. This is the inner war without escape. This is the inner war without escape. So nobody can escape this inner war that takes place in the human breast or the human consciousness. Because in each of us, like there is hidden the divine presence, there is also lurking and hidden the absolute opposite of that divine presence, which is the hidden foe, what Sri Aurobindo here and Narad here refers to, and that is the whisper that lures to evil the human heart. So there is a something that tends to drive us towards the path of pain and suffering. And it's a hidden foe, he refers to Narad, that is hidden in the human consciousness and that lures to evil the human heart. And how does it function? It functions through the whisper. It nudges you to do what is the wrong thing to do, or the thing that is going to cause you suffering. You are aware of it, and yet you are unable to stop it. Okay, so he continues, hard is the world redeemer's heavy task, and therefore it is hard. The world redeemer here is the avatar. Hard is the world redeemer. Those that have come down to take forward the human evolution. Hard is their task. Hard is the world redeemer's heavy task. The world itself becomes his adversary. So in this case, the world redeemer, the man or the person or the woman who comes down as the avatar or the vibhuti to help man to progress, the entire world becomes his adversary. Not just each human being, but this hidden foe that is lodged also in the earth consciousness. The world itself becomes his adversary. Those he would save are his antagonists. So those he tries to save are actually against him. Antagonists, they oppose him. This world is in love with its own ignorance. Its darkness turns away from the Savior light. It gives the cross in payment for the crown. His work is a trickle of splendor in a long night. So again, the imagery of Christ, it gives the cross in payment for the crown. So instead of Christ being given the crown to be the king and to help save the world and people respecting him and acknowledging his work, instead, what happened to him? Stones were thrown at him and he was crucified and killed on the cross. So this is the lot that anybody who has come here for the mission of taking the earth's evolution forward has to meet this opposition in the world, in human breasts, in human beings. That is the natural law of ignorance that takes over in this world, because there is an ignorance that is lodged in us, that opposes light. There is a part in us that doesn't want to go towards the light, doesn't want to choose the path of the divine. And we have to be aware of that part. And when we become aware of that part in us, we will also become aware of that part in the world. And the more you can recognize it and come in and become conscious of it, the more you can reject it and refuse to allow it play in your own consciousness. So the world is in love with its ignorance. Its darkness turns away from the Savior light. It gives the cross in payment for the crown. His work is a trickle of splendor in a long night. He sees the long march of time, the little one. So even the work of the avatar, the world redeemer, is like a trickle of splendor in a long night. It's very difficult. The night swallows up the light. It tends to swallow it up very fast. He sees the long march of time, the little one. A few are saved, the rest strive on and fail. A sun has passed, on earth night's shadow falls. Yes, there are happy ways near to God's sun, but few are they who tread the sunlit path. You remember Mother's words on the sunlit path? She says, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to suffer so much. You don't have to experience so much of pain if you choose the sunlit path. Now, to be able to, someone asked her, what is the sunlit path? And this sunlit path is first, she said, to become conscious. Conscious of yourself and the movements of your being. Conscious of how there is darkness and light, shadow and light in you. And then at each moment, choose the light. And let the psychic being, the inner divine presence in you, come forward and begin to become the director and leader of your life. So make your psychic, your inner consciousness, the leader of your life. That is the sunlit path. So here Narad refers to this. He sees the long march of time, the little one. A few are saved, the rest strive on and fail. The sun has passed, on earth night shadow falls. Yes, there are happy ways near to God's sun, but few are they who tread the sunlit path. Only the pure in soul can walk in light. An exit is shown, a road of hard escape from the sorrow and the darkness and the chain. So there is an exit door, though the door of that exit also needs tapasya, needs some sort of inner work. It can't be that you just exit and you go into this wonderful world of light and beauty and love and live in that consciousness. Those who are able to live in that consciousness have taken that exit route. There is a shortcut. There is another way. Pain does not always have to be the companion of your life's journey. But if you do not take that exit door and you do not tread the sunlit path, then whatever you do, suffering and pain will be with you as long as you live. So, Narad here points, but few are they who tread the sunlit path. Only the pure in soul can walk in light. An exit is shown, a road of hard escape from the sorrow and the darkness and the chain. But how shall a few escaped release the world? Narad asks. Okay, there are few who have escaped the world's law of ignorance, the world's law of pain, the world's law of suffering, the world's law of darkness. But how will these few release the world? Can they do it? The human mass lingers beneath the yoke. Escape, however high, redeems not life. So this escape, however high, the escape of nirvana, the escape of moksha, the escape of samadhi, does not redeem life. It's just an escape. But how should a few escaped release the world? The human mass lingers beneath the yoke. Escape, however high, redeems not life. Life that is left behind on a fallen earth. So those who do not take, you can either take the sunlit path, Narad says, or then you can go into some sort of spiritual samadhi or nirvanic bliss where you yourself escape from life through your own realization, what is called the yoga, the old yogas. But then he says that will that escape help the rest of the world? Or is it that you have escaped and you are living in that beatific consciousness, but the world is still in its old ignorant way? Therefore he says escape is not the solution. The solution is something else. Therefore the world redeemer, the avataric mission, and the avatar has to come down on earth in human form and not escape pain and suffering, but go through it and lead by his example the rest of humanity. So these are, this is Narad, who is deep and intense and very, very profound philosophy. People, this is the kind of philosophy you would read in your doctorate. And here we are merrily reading this. But there is a lot, layers and layers of knowledge behind that you have to understand. The human mass lingers beneath the yoke. Escape, however high, redeems not life. Life that is left behind on a fallen earth. Escape cannot uplift the abandoned race to bring to it victory and the reign of God. A greater power must come, a larger light. Although light grows on earth and night recedes, yet till the evil is slain in its own home, and light invades the world's inconscient base, and perished has the adversary force, he still must labor on, his work half done. One yet may come armored, invincible, his will immobile meets the mobile hour, the world's blows cannot bend that victor head. So, the only solution, Narad tells Ashwapati and the Queen Mother, is to bring down a greater power into earth, not to escape through a personal moksha or a personal nirvana or a personal realization. So to bring down a greater power is the only way that earth can change, because although light grows on earth and night recedes, yet till the evil is slain in its own home. The home here refers to the human consciousness and humanity and the earth. Yet till the evil is slain in its own home and light invades the world's inconscient base, ignorant base, and perished has the adversary force, he still must labor on, his work half done. Whose work half done? The world Redeemer's work. One yet may come armored, invincible, his will immobile meet the mobile hour, the world's blows cannot bend that victor head. Calm and sure are his steps in the growing night. The gold recedes, he hurries not his pace. He turns not to high voices in the night. He asks no aid from the inferior gods. His eyes are fixed on his immutable aim. Man turns aside or chooses easier paths. He keeps to the one high and difficult road. That soul can climb to the eternal peaks. So here Narad is distinguishing and making a difference between how the world redeemer, those that are leading the evolution, what is their attitude, what is their method, and how they lead their life on earth, and how man leads his life on earth, human beings. So he says, while the world redeemer, the world's blows cannot bend that victor head. Who's the victor head? The world redeemer. Those that have come with the mission to lead the world to light. Calm and sure are his steps in the growing night. The gold recedes, he hurries not his pace. So unlike man, when we don't see the aim close to us, when we feel that our goal and our aim is going further and further and we're unable to realize it, what do? We give up. We get despondent. We get depressed. We say, oh, see, I'm not able to do this or achieve this, or whatever it could be a material aim, it could be a spiritual aim, it could be a emotional aim, but all aims are there. We constantly fret and get into a depressed state. What does the man who is leading the world, or the one that is conscious of his psychic being, do? He goes slower and slower, steadier and steadier, never gives up, keeps going on. The goal goes further and further away, and he keeps walking towards it calmly, without any kind of emotion, any kind of reaction, any kind of movement of despair or despondency. So this is the way to lead one's life. In a way, Narad is also giving a very important message to us. He's saying that this is the way. If you want to live from within, if you live from within, you will be able to do that. If you live from your psychic being, you will be able to do that. If you live from your mind or your emotional being or your vital, which is full of desire, it wants quick results. You don't get what you want, it starts getting despondent. Then your whole life is a mess. And that is why you see most people suffer. So, he says, calm and sure are his steps in the growing night. So the darker it gets, the calmer he gets. You understand the difference? He turns not to high voices in the night. He asks no aid from the inferior gods. Who are the inferior gods? Think about that. Who are your inferior gods? He asks no aid from the inferior gods. His eyes are fixed on his immutable aim. Man turns aside, and unlike him, what does man do? Human beings do. We do. We quickly turn aside and choose easier paths. While he keeps on, he keeps to the one high and difficult road. So you always hear that you have a choice which road to take. And that is that hidden foe that he talks about, that pushes man towards the easier path, the compromise. Now this compromise is first done with oneself and then causes disturbance. Now one way of knowing that, how do you know when you're compromising? You will feel disturbed. When there is no disturbance, there is no compromise. So he keeps to the one high and difficult road that soul can climb to the eternal peaks. The ineffable plains already have felt his tread. He has made heaven and earth his instruments, but the limits fall from him of earth and heaven. Their law he transcends, but uses as his means. He has seized life's hands. He has mastered his own heart. You've all experienced those moments in your life when something very calm and deep-seated happens within you, and you begin, nothing disturbs you, and there is some sort of an inner guidance or an inner presence that just leads you. When you can make that state that you're in sometimes a constant state, that you make it a permanent state of your consciousness, then that is a great progress towards the light. That is what Narad here is pointing out. So, He has seized life's hands. He has mastered his own heart. The feints of nature mislead not his sight. Inflexible his look towards truth's far end. Fate's deaf resistance cannot break his will. In the dreadful passages, the fatal paths, invulnerable his soul, his heart unslain, he lives through the opposition of earth's powers, and nature's ambushes, and the world's attacks. His spirit's stature transcending pain and bliss, he fronts evil and good with calm and equal eyes. So you can see the consciousness and the state, inner state that comes over. His spirit's stature transcending pain and bliss, he fronts evil and good with calm and equal eyes. He too must grapple with the riddling Sphinx and plunge into her long obscurity. He has broken into the inconscious depths that veil themselves even from their own regard. He has seen God's slumber shape these magic worlds. He has watched the dumb God fashioning matter's frame, dreaming the dreams of its unknowing sleep, and watched the unconscious force that built the stars. He has learned the inconscious workings and its law, its incoherent thoughts and rigid acts, its hazard wastes of impulse and idea, the chaos of its mechanic frequencies, its random calls, its whispers, falsely true, misleaders of the hooded listening soul. All things come to its ear, but nothing abides. All rose from the silence, all goes back to its hush. Its somnolence founded the universe, its obscure waking makes the world seem vain. Arisen from nothingness and towards nothingness turned, its dark and potent nascence was earth's start. It is the waste stuff from which all was made. Into its deeps creation can collapse. Its opposition clogs the march of the soul. It is the mother of our ignorance. So this is Narad. He's gone on for 4 or 5 pages here, explaining the whole, the way, the laws of the earth, the laws that guide our human life on earth, the way the earth was made, the problem of pain, the way of fate. And that is through this, Narad is explaining to the Queen Mother that Savitri has come down on earth for a special mission. She is the world redeemer, and therefore this is the path she must take. So he must call light into its dark abysms, else never can truth conquer matter's sleep, and all earth look into the eyes of God. All things obscure, his knowledge must relume. All things perverse, his power must unknot. He must pass to the other shore of falsehood's sea. He must enter the world's dark to bring their light. The heart of evil must be bared to his eyes. He must learn its cosmic dark necessity, its right and its dire roots in nature's soil. He must know the thought that moves the demon act and justifies the titan's erring pride and the falsehood lurking in earth's crooked dreams. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his sun. For this he must go down invade the dolorous vasts, imperishable and wise and infinite, he still must travel hell the world to save. He still must travel hell the world to save. Into the eternal light he shall emerge on borders of the meeting of all worlds. There on the verge of nature's summit steps, the secret law of each thing is fulfilled. All contraries heal their long dissidence. So here Narad is continuing. He says that the world Redeemer, he or she who has come to as a representative of the divine on earth in human form, must go into hell if he is to save the world. He must travel into darkness to be able to take the world out into light. He must know the thought that moves the demon act. That means that unless he himself experiences all the pain, suffering, darkness, demoniac acts, and experiences himself all the effects of those in his own being, he is or she is not going to be able to lead the world or humanity out of its darkness and ignorance. So this is a beautiful poetic passage where Narad beautifully explains it. He must call light into its dark abysms, else never can truth conquer matter's sleep, and all earth look into the eyes of God. All things obscure his knowledge must relume, all things perverse his power must unknot. He must pass to the other shore of falsehood's sea. He must enter the world's dark to bring their light, and so on. So, the secret law of each thing is fulfilled. All contraries heal their long dissidence. There, where? On the borders of the meeting of all worlds, on the summit of nature's steps, there meet and clasp the eternal opposites. There pain becomes a violent, fiery joy. Evil turns back to its original good, and sorrow lies upon the breasts of bliss. She has learned to weep glad tears of happiness. Her gaze is charged with a wistful ecstasy. Then shall be ended here the law of pain. So Narad is also giving us the clue of how pain can end in this world. When, what he says is, when the world Redeemer is able to take humanity to the verge of nature's summit steps, to the highest summit of evolutionary nature, on the highest summit of nature's evolution. There, the secret law of each thing, in that highest consciousness, in that highest plane, the secret law of each thing is fulfilled, and in that consciousness, in that plane of consciousness, all contraries heal their long dissidence. There meet and clasp the eternal opposites. Who are the eternal opposites? Pain and joy, sorrow and bliss, falsehood and truth. All the eternal opposites. There meet and clasp the eternal opposites. Their pain becomes a violent, fiery joy. Can you imagine your pain becoming a fiery, violent joy? Have you experienced that? You have all experienced that. When you take anything to its, when you perfect yourself, when you go beyond your own endurance, you will notice that. Even in sport, there is a time when you have exceeded beyond yourself, and you will experience that pain turning into a fiery bliss of joy. Evil turns back to its original good, and sorrow lies upon the breasts of bliss. She has learned to weep glad tears of happiness. Her gaze is charged with a wistful ecstasy. Then shall be ended here the law of pain. Earth shall be made a home of heaven's light, a seer heaven born shall lodge in human breasts. So then earth will become a home of heaven's light when we are able to change our human consciousness to its highest evolutionary possibility and potential, to be able to experience sorrow as bliss, to be able to experience pain as joy, to be able to experience behind evil the deeper good, and take each thing to its highest level. A seer heaven-born shall lodge in human breasts. The superconscient beam shall touch men's eyes. The superconscient beam shall touch men's eyes, and the truth-conscious world come down to earth, invading matter with the Spirit's ray, awaking its silence to immortal thoughts, awaking the dumb heart to the living word. This mortal life shall house eternity's bliss. The body's self taste immortality. And then what will happen? Narad says. He says, then mortal life shall house eternity's bliss, and the body itself will taste immortality. Then shall the world Redeemer's task be done. The world Redeemer is in reference here to the avatar, the delegate or representative of the divine that takes a human form to lead the evolutionary march, to lead humanity to its next level of consciousness. So these are very, very profound lines in Savitri, very deep mantric verses that can create a reverberation in our own consciousness and make us experience something deeper and greater than the mind, deeper and greater than our own human petty consciousness. We live in our petty self, don't we? Bounded by our petty thoughts, petty emotions, smallnesses, selfishness. And these words can just bring you out of yourself, bring you out of the ego consciousness, and take you into a deep, profound inner consciousness, and give you the possibility of the promise of the future. There is a promise in the future, and there is a promise in all of us in our consciousness. However, until that happens, Narad says, the quotation mark continues, please note, till then must life carry its seed of death. So this is the necessity of death. We always say, why do we die? We die because we don't know how to renew our life. We don't know how to renew our body. Our body is mortal because we have not experienced immortality in our mind or in our cells of our body. We are not able to turn pain into bliss. We are not able to turn sorrow into happiness. And because of that, we suffer mortality. So till then, we have to die. Till then, he says, the seed of death is going to be planted in human consciousness, in humanity, in all of us. We will have to die until we are able to change this and live in this highest, deepest inner consciousness. Whenever we are able to do it, and for whatever period of time, we will experience something of immortality. So till then must life carry its seed of death, and sorrow's plaint be heard in the slow night. O mortal, bear this great world's law of pain. So Narad turns to the Queen Mother, turns to Savitri. He's speaking to all of them. Ashwapati is there, Savitri is there, the Queen Mother is there. They're sitting in Ashwapati's palace. Narad is speaking to them and says, O mortal, bear this great world's law of pain. In thy hard passage through a suffering world, lean for thy soul's support on heaven's strength. Turn towards high truth. Aspire to love and peace. A little bliss is lent thee from above, a touch divine upon thy human days. Make of thy daily way a pilgrimage, for through small joys and griefs thou movest towards God. Haste not towards Godhead on a dangerous road. open not thy doorways to a nameless power. Climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. Against the law, he pits his single will. So the Titan, unlike the divine way, the sunlit way, the Titan is one who operates from his ego self. And he pits his... So the Titan is normally a large force of the ego. Climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. Against the law, he pits his single will. Across its way, he throws his pride of might. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms, aspiring to live near the deathless sun. So, what here Narad is saying, or what Sri Aurobindo is saying through Narad, you can say, he is trying to differentiate between the two ways of going. One is the way of the Titan, titanic forces. Who are Titans? Give me some examples of Titans you know in recent history. Hitler, Ravan, yeah? Okay, but you don't know Ravan, he's not recent. So anyway, doesn't matter, we've heard of him. But Hitler is very, very recent, we've all seen. Who else? There are many others. Mussolini, Stalin, these are Titans. Now do you know the difference between a Titan and who are representatives of the divine? Give me some examples of those. Vibhutis, avatars, Napoleon, Augustus Caesar. There are many others. There are quite a few numbers. Anyway, so what he's saying is that there are two ways. The way of the Titan, and then he explains what happens to those, how they meet their sorry end. And the way of the divine representative. And what is the difference between the two? One is inflicting pain, and the other one is transforming pain in himself into bliss. One is trying to bring about a new world order and a new society. The other one is trying to bring about his own world order, where he is the king and he rules over the entire world and destroys everything that he considers to be against it. The other one is taking everybody else along. The Titan only takes himself and a few others with him. Now there are many, many comparisons and differentiations between the Titan and the Avatar. So you've read mythology, the difference between Rama and Ravan, the difference between Arjun and Duryodhan. Yeah, Arjun is a representative of the highest possibility of man. Duryodhan is the huge power, but one that is governed by the ego. The difference, but great power, no doubt, right? The difference between Sri Aurobindo and Hitler, etc. So, till then must life carry its seed of death, and sorrow's plaint be heard in the slow night. O mortal, bear this great world's law of pain. In thy heart passage through a suffering world, lean for thy soul's support on heaven's strength. So one works through the principle of surrender and principle of leaning towards the higher consciousness. The other one leans towards his own ego consciousness. So, heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms, aspiring to live near the deathless sun. He strives with a giant strength to wrest by force from life and nature the immortal's right. He takes by storm the world and fate and heaven. He comes not to the high world maker's seat. He waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. So a very clear distinction here. He comes not to the high world maker's seat. He waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. All he would make his own, leave nothing free. So the one thing that you see always in Titans is they want to possess everything. They want to gain control over all peoples, all nations, all wealth. That is the method. Instead of self-giving, it is self-aggrandizing. There you see, and they do not believe in anything but their own strength and own power. They also yearn for immortality, but their immortality is through destroying everybody else. Intention is different, or the method, is different. I don't know. Yeah, there are quite a few of them. Okay, so He waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. All he would make his own, leave nothing free. So one thing that they always do is, first thing they do is they usurp freedom. That's the first sign of a titan. They will not allow anybody to be free. So what did Hitler do first? Took away the freedom. Every titan you will see, the first thing they do is take away your freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of life, freedom of movement. You'll see what he did. All he would make his own, leave nothing free, stretching his small self to cope with the infinite. Stretching his small self, that is the ego, to cope with the infinite. Obstructing the God's open ways, he makes his own estate of the earth's air and light. So obstructing the God's open ways, he makes his own estate of the earth's air and light. A monopolist of the world energy, he dominates the life of common men. His pain and others' pain, he makes his means. On death and suffering, he builds his throne. In the hurry and clangor of his acts of might, in a riot and excess of fame and shame, by his magnitudes of hate and violence, by the quaking of the world beneath his tread, he matches himself against the eternal's calm and feels in himself the greatness of a God. Power is his image of celestial self. The Titan's heart is a sea of fire and force. He exults in the death of things and ruin and fall. He feeds his strength with his own and others' pain. In the world's pathos and passion, he takes delight. His pride, his might, call for the struggle and pang. He glories in the sufferings of the flesh and covers the stigmata with the Stoic's name. His eyes blinded and visionless stare at the sun. His eyes blindless and visionless stare at the sun, the seeker's sight, receding from his heart, can find no more the light of eternity. He sees the beyond as an emptiness void of soul, and takes his night for a dark infinite. His nature magnifies the unreal's blank and sees in naught the sole reality. He would stamp his single figure on the world, obsess the world's rumors with his single name, his moment's center, the vast universe. He sees his little self as very God. His little I has swallowed the whole world. His ego has stretched into infinity. His mind, a beat in original nothingness, ciphers his thought on a slate of hourless time. He builds on a mighty vacancy of soul a huge philosophy of nothingness. He builds on a mighty vacancy of soul a huge philosophy of nothingness. In him, Nirvana lives and speaks and acts, impossibly creating a universe. An eternal zero is his formless self. His spirit, the void, impersonal absolute. Take not that stride. So Narad once again addresses the gathering and says, take not that stride. And this time he is speaking to not just them, but to the whole of humanity. Take not that stride, O growing soul of man. Cast not thyself into that night of God. So that also is a night of God. Please note how wonderful Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is. It is not that that is not part of God, but that is the night of God, he tells. That's why there is no evil. There are only things that are not in their right place. So, this is how wonderful this is. And therefore those who become, even Ravan said that, I need release from Ram, Sri Ram, to be able to do my dharma and karma. So he also needed that release from that night of God. You saw how Ramayana is and what happens in the end. And that is with all our stories, myths, not only in India, but all over. The Greek mythologies, the stories, they're all very similar. The same pattern is repeated all the time. And the names are different, the context is different, but the substance is the same. Then, his spirit, the void, impersonal, absolute. Take not that stride, O growing soul of man. Cast not thyself into that night of God. The soul's suffering is not eternity's key, or ransom by sorrow, heaven's demand on life. O mortal, bear, but ask not for the stroke. So again, Sri Aurobindo constantly is going back to the same note in his whole yoga, and also in Savitri, Narad is saying the same thing. This word, this emphasis on the word, bear. Have you noticed how much often he says it? Endure, bear. Only through endurance and bearing the pain can one convert it into joy. To bear the onslaught. It's not by hitting out against it. It's by bearing it. That you turn your nerves into steel. You turn your consciousness into gold. The alchemist, the alchemy of your consciousness from its dross, human, muddy, lower form turns into its higher gold. That's why alchemy and alchemist, these are very important words. What happens? How do you make gold? How are things turned to their sublimest form? What is the process? It's the same process in human consciousness. So again, Narad here says, listen to the words. O mortal, bear it. Don't hit out. O mortal, bear, but ask not for the stroke. Don't ask for the stroke, but bear it. Too soon will grief and anguish find thee out. Too enormous is that venture for thy will. Don't try and do it yourself. Too soon will grief and anguish find thee out. Too enormous is that venture for thy will. Only in limits can man's strength be safe. Yet is infinity thy spirit's goal. Its bliss is there behind the world's face of tears. A power is in thee that thou knowest not. Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment, and while thou shuttest it in, the seal is pain. So another way of describing and understanding pain. So Narad explains pain as what? How does he define pain? What is pain? Suppose somebody were to ask you, what is pain? So his explanation is, a power is in thee that thou knowest not. Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment. And while thou shuttest it in, while thou shuttest what in? No, that power that is within thee, that is the imprisoned spark of the divine. While the ego shuts it in, the seal is pain. Have you understood? So what Narad is saying here is that all of us have the divine essence, the spark of that infinite divine in us. Now, whether you call it the Chaitya Purush, the psychic being, or the whatever you want to call it, the flame, the light in you. Yeah. He says that as long, and this light, and this divine that is in us, is imprisoned by time and is shut because of the ego. It's shuttest in, that is, the outer personality, the ego personality, shuts this divine power and this divine light in a kind of a case within us where we are not aware of it. Are you aware of the divine in you? What is blocking it? Out of what? So something is blocking it, right? Okay, so listen to this carefully. Because it's done in poetic mantric form. It goes deeper than the thought. No explanation is good enough. It's deeper than what I can explain or what anybody can explain. So, its bliss is there, behind the world's face of tears. A power is in thee that thou knowest not. The first thing about this power is we are not aware of it. Second thing, a power is in thee that thou knowest not. Thou art a vessel. A vessel, you understand? Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. What is he referring to? The body is a envelope, a vessel, a bottle, whatever you want to call it. Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. Because it is imprisoning it, the body. It seeks relief. What seeks relief? The imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment. Okay? And while thou shuttest it in, thou here refers to which thou? Not the capital T, but the small t. Yeah. While thou, the outer nature, the ego, the body, whatever word you want to call it. And while thou shuttest it in, the seal is pain. The seal is pain. Have you understood? But what is the seal of, what is pain? Now can anyone explain to me in their own words? What is pain? It's a very important concept to understand. You won't understand Sri Aurobindo unless you understand pain. No, that's all theoretical. What is pain? What is he trying to say here? So it's a smallness of the being that is enveloped, that inner divine that is imprisoned. That seal is pain. Because it wants to escape. The divine in you wants to escape from its own small envelopment in the shuttered consciousness of the ego. Pain is the hand of God sculpturing men to greatness. That is, it's also the hand of nature, not God, hand of nature. Why? Because it is through pain that it keeps waking you up. Pain wakes you up, it's a seal. It wakes you up to say there's something else within you. Discover it, discover it. And the moment you refuse to discover it, you get a lash. So it's the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness. It's like a hammer. It's a hammer chiseling you all the time. You understand? So when you feel pain, what should you do? Let's do it practically. Why are we reading this philosophy? When you feel pain, what should you do? What do you do? Bear, endure it, turn it. O mortal, bear, but ask not for the stroke. Too soon will grief and anguish find thee out. Too enormous is that venture for thy will. Only in limits can man's strength be safe, yet is infinity thy spirit's goal. Its bliss is there, behind the world's face of tears. A power is in thee that thou knowest not. Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment. And while thou shuttest it in, the seal is pain. Bliss is the Godhead's crown. Eternal, free. Freedom is the most important law of the spirit, of nature, of development. Anything and any being that is not free is going to experience pain. So, bliss is the Godhead's crown, eternal, free, unburdened by life's blind mystery of pain. So what do we always talk about? I want to be free. I want to now, I've done my responsibility for my family, for my society, for this. What is the longing in man's heart? Freedom. What is actually happening behind that? Freedom. Okay. So, as a teacher, you want to be free of what? What do you often say to your friends? Think about it. Thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment. And while thou shuttest it in, the seal is pain. Bliss is the Godhead's crown, eternal, free. Unburdened by life's blind mystery of pain. Mystery of pain. Just see how beautifully Sri Aurobindo describes it. Pain is the signature of the ignorance. Now what can you say is better than this? Pain is the signature of the ignorance. Like bliss is the signature of what? So, bliss is the Godhead's crown, eternal, free, unburdened by life's blind mystery of pain. Pain is the signature of the ignorance, attesting the secret God denied by life, So what does it attest, this signature? Attesting the secret God denied by life. Beautiful, profound. This is intoxicating, I'm telling you. Until life finds him, pain can never end. Until life finds him, whom? The secret God within yourself, not some figure standing somewhere else. Okay. Pain is the signature of the ignorance, attesting the secret God denied by life. Until life finds him, pain can never end. Pain can never end. Notice that. Until life finds him, pain can never end. Calm is self's victory, overcoming fate. Calm is self's victory, overcoming fate. Bear, again. You notice how many times he uses the word bear. I think somebody should actually count it. Bear. Again, Sri Aurobindo writes bear. And with a semicolon after that, not even a comma. Bear, stop for some time, bear it. Thou shalt find at last thy road to bliss. Bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives. And then there's a beautiful explanation of bliss after this. What is bliss? So he's described what is joy, what is pain. Now he will describe the root and the origin of bliss and how bliss exists in the world. So I'm just going to read this. Quietly listen. Bear, thou shalt find at last thy road to bliss. Bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives. Even pain and grief are garbs of world delight. Even pain and grief are cloaks like clothes of world delight. They cover the delight of the world. So bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives. Even pain and grief are garbs of world delight. It hides behind thy sorrow and thy cry, because thy strength is a part and not God's whole. Because afflicted by the little self, thy consciousness forgets to be divine. Because your strength is a part and not the whole of God. Because you are afflicted by the ego self. That is why your consciousness forgets to be divine. This is what Narad is saying. Because afflicted by the little self, thy consciousness forgets to be divine, as it walks in the vague penumbra of the flesh, and cannot bear the world's tremendous touch. Thou criest out and sayest that there is pain. It is because you are afflicted by the ego self, Narad tells the mother, Queen Mother, and that is why your consciousness forgets to be divine. And it walks in the vague penumbra, shadow of the flesh. It is deeply rooted in the body and cannot bear the world's tremendous touch, the touch of the world that is strong and deep and intense. When it cannot bear that touch, you cry out and say that there is pain. Indifference, pain and joy, a triple disguise, attire of the rapturous dancer in the ways, withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. So these three, which are a triple disguise, withhold from you the body of God's bliss. Withhold, do not allow you to experience the bliss and delight of the world delight and of the divine bliss. What are the three things? Indifference, pain and joy. A triple disguise, even joy is included in that. Attire of the rapturous dancer in the ways, withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. So what is the difference between bliss and joy? They are quite different. The experience, the vibration is different. Thy spirit strength shall make thee one with God. Thy agony shall change to ecstasy. Indifference deepen into infinity's calm, and joy laugh nude on the peaks of the Absolute. So it is only your strength, your spirit strength that can make you one with God, and change agony to ecstasy, indifference to infinity's calm, and joy to bliss on the peaks of the Absolute. And this is all, don't forget, in iambic pentameter poetry. So the whole of Savitri, 24,000 lines in iambic pentameter. Stress, unstress, stress, unstress. So it's not prose, it's poetic form. And you see how you can write like this and such depth of thought, and yet in a poetic form. Now, if this is not one of the world's most beautiful literature we've read, then what is? And it's undiscovered by this world. Now, O mortal, who complainest of death and fate, O mortal, who complainest of death and fate, accuse none of the harms thyself hast called. So, O human being, mortal means all of us, mortal beings, we who have complained, we complain of death and we complain of our fate, our destiny. You have no one to accuse but yourself, because you have called it on. This troubled world thou hast chosen for thy home. Thou art thyself the author of thy pain. Once in the immortal boundlessness of self, in a vast of truth and consciousness and light, the soul looked out from its felicity. It felt the Spirit's interminable bliss. It knew itself deathless, timeless, spaceless, one. It saw the eternal, lived in the infinite. So once in the immortal boundlessness of self, when you are in your higher self, the self with a capital S, not in the ego self, but in your true self, full self of yourself, then the soul looked out from its felicity, bliss, and it feels the Spirit's bliss. It knows itself deathless, timeless, spaceless, one. It sees the eternal, lives in the infinite. Then, curious of a shadow thrown by truth, it strained toward some otherness of self. It was drawn to an unknown face, peering through night. It sensed a negative infinity, a void supernal whose immense excess, imitating God and everlasting time, offered a ground for nature's adverse birth and matter's rigid, hard unconsciousness, harboring the brilliance of a transient soul that lights up birth and death and ignorant life. However, when the soul, the self, which is in that, experiencing that deathlessness, that timelessness, that spacelessness, it becomes curious because it sees a shadow thrown by truth. And because it strains towards some otherness of itself and gets drawn to an unknown face, it senses a negative infinity. So this is actually a description that Narad is giving of why the soul, which is in its pure state, wants to come out of it and experience the world. A mind arose that stared at nothingness. So this is from the self and from matter, mind arises, a mind with a capital M, that wants to see and wants to understand this otherness. A mind arose that stared at nothingness, till figures formed of what could never be. It housed the contrary of all that is. A naught appeared as being's huge sealed cause, its dumb support in a blank infinite, in whose abyssum spirit must disappear. A darkened nature lived and held the seed of spirit hidden and feigning not to be. So a darkened nature lived and held the seed of spirit, hidden and feigning not to be. Eternal consciousness became a freak of an unsouled, almighty, inconscient, and breathed no more as spirit's native air. Bliss was an incident of a mortal hour, a stranger in the insentient universe. As one drawn by the grandeur of the void, the soul attracted, leaned to the abyss, It longed for the adventure of ignorance and the marvel and surprise of the unknown and the endless possibility that lurked in the womb of chaos and in nothing's gulf, or looked from the unfathomed eyes of chance. It tired of its unchanging happiness. It turned away from immortality. So this is actually very deep, occult explanation of why the need of the world, the universe. What was the need of the birth of the soul that was living in its absolute home of bliss into an ignorant world, into nature? Why did the absolute, the divine, want to come down into the world, into matter, into nature, into life, and so on? Because it saw that when it was living in its absolute state of bliss, an absolute home of the self, that there was a shadow cast upon truth. And it wanted to explore that shadow. It wanted to experience this adventure of consciousness and also to know itself in a more deeper, more profound way. It wanted to see itself, in a sense, materialize. And therefore, the original soul, that is the soul from which the capital S, self, from which we all are parts and portions of, made this foray into the earth, into nature, into birth, into time, and into space. So the original one, that is spaceless, timeless, eternal, came into time, space, and death, and life. So this is a very deep explanation which will take you time to understand. You'll have to read this passage over and over and over again for the reverberations of its vibration to enter into your consciousness. Till then, just listen to it and see what you pick up. So in a sense, Sri Aurobindo here is describing why the universe was created. Why did the human soul, or why did the divine divine soul enter into the human body, and why did it cloak itself here? That's why these words, we have chosen it. Because see the beginning of the sentence of this paragraph. O mortal, you who complainest of death and fate, accuse none of the harms you have yourself called, because this troubled world that thou hast chosen for your home, because you have chosen this troubled world for your home, and because you have chosen it, you are the author of your own pain. So the narrative starts like this in this passage. Now you understand why he starts like this. Why have you chosen it? How have you chosen it? That's a description that continues. He explains why. So, it tired of its unchanging happiness. It turned away from immortality. It was drawn to hazard's call and danger's charm. It yearned to the pathos of grief, the drama of pain, perdition's peril, the wounded bear escape, the music of ruin and the glamour and crash, the saviour of pity and the gamble of love and passion and the ambiguous face of fate. A world of hard endeavour and difficult toil and battle on extinction's perilous verge, a clash of forces, a vast incertitude, the joy of creation out of nothingness, strange meetings on the roads of ignorance, and the companionship of half-known souls, or the solitary greatness and lonely force of a separate being conquering its world. So, it's quite clear here. So, the joy of creation out of nothingness, strange meetings on the roads of ignorance, and the companionship of half-known souls, or the solitary greatness and lonely force of a separate being conquering its world, called it from its too safe eternity. A huge descent began, a giant fall, for what the spirit sees creates a truth, and what the soul imagines is made a world. So, this is the power of imagination. For what the spirit sees creates a truth, and what the soul imagines is made a world. A thought that leaped from the timeless can become indicator of cosmic consequence and the itinerary of the gods, a cyclic movement in eternal time. Thus came, born from a blind, tremendous choice, this great, perplexed and discontented world, this haunt of ignorance, this home of pain. There are pitched desire's tents grief's headquarters. A vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss. So this is how Narad ends. So he says, a vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss. And this is how came about this blind, this great, perplexed and discontented world. How did the world begin? It began because of a blind, tremendous choice that the soul of the world, soul of the divine, the self, soul of humanity, whatever you want to call it, took to enter into this, to experience itself, to know itself, and to experience the otherness of self. So, now these are very difficult things to put into mental language and English language. These are concepts and these are ideas that go beyond, the purely ordinary, rational, little mind, the outer mind. One needs to have a higher development of the intuitive mind or the higher reaches of consciousness to totally understand it. But some glimpse of it comes through. Some sort of, you can get a sense that something true is being said, something that you recognize in whatever form. The words are obviously limiting. The experience is far more vast. So, this great perplexed and discontented world, this haunt of ignorance, this home of pain, there are pitched desire's tents, grief's headquarters. Where are these tents pitched? The world itself is a tent of where desires and grief's headquarters are here in this world. So there are pitched where? In this home, this world, discontented world, there are pitched desire's tents, grief's headquarters. A vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss. So this whole world is in a sense a disguise of the eternal's bliss. A vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss. Close inverted commas. At last, now Ashwapati replies to the seer. Is then the spirit ruled by an outward world, he asks. O seer, is there no remedy within? So is the spirit ruled by an outward world and there is no remedy within to change that? Is there no remedy within? Do we have to go by the outer laws of pain and desire and grief and so on? O seer, is there no remedy within? But what is fate, if not the spirit's will? After long time fulfilled by cosmic force, I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compare of fate? I deemed, meaning Ashwapati had called down Savitri's birth. So he said, I deemed a mighty power had come with Savitri. So is Savitri going to be a victim of her fate, her destiny? Satyavan must die and that she must be alone and lose her soulmate, lover, husband after 1 year of marriage. O seer, is there no remedy within? But what is fate if not the spirit's will, after long time fulfilled by cosmic force? I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compare of fate? So is this great power that came down with Savitri, can it not battle against fate? Can it not change fate? Because this is such a great power, the power of the Mahashakti, the mother that has come with her. So can it not change her own will, her own fate? Because after all, what is her fate? Her fate is something her spirit has decided. So this is what Ashwapati now is asking Narad. But what is fate, if not the spirit's will, after long time fulfilled by cosmic force? Now there is a deep occult truth in what Ashwapati is saying. He's saying, what is fate after all, if not the spirit's choice and will? At some time the spirits decided to go through this journey, this experience of joy and grief and pain and desire, and has in fact decided at some point what road it's going to take to be able to fulfill it. So he says, but what is fate if not the spirit's will? But this spirit's will is forgotten by the outer body and the outer mind and the outer consciousness because it is fulfilled after a very long time. It's not immediately fulfilled. So your spirit has willed something. It might have willed it in a past life. It might have willed it in this life many years ago. Your mind and your outer consciousness has forgotten what your spirit has willed. And therefore, when it comes true, you don't know that you have chosen it. So what is fate? In a sense, this is one definition of what fate is. When people ask, is fate blind? Is there free will? This is a big question. Whole book is written by Sri Aurobindo on fate and free will. And This is a question that has haunted humanity, philosophers, and even yourselves, that you always ask, that is everything predestined, or do I have a choice? So here is the answer Ashwapati gives. O seer, is there no remedy within? But what is fate, if not the spirit's will, after long time fulfilled by cosmic force? I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Don't forget, Ashwapati himself had willed the coming of Savitri. He had called down the soul of Savitri for a particular purpose. So he remembers that. He said, I deemed a mighty power had come with her. Is not that power the high compare of fate? So that power that has come with her, is it not as equivalent to fate? But Narad answered, covering truth with truth, O Ashwapati, random seem the ways, along whose banks your footsteps stray or run, in casual hours or moments of the gods. Yet your least stumblings are foreseen above. Infallibly the curves of life are drawn, following the stream of time through the unknown. They are led by a clue the calm immortals keep. This blazoned hieroglyph of prophet mourns, a meaning more sublime in symbols writes than sealed thought wakes to. But of this high script, how shall my voice convince the mind of earth? Heaven's wiser love rejects the mortal's prayer, unblinded by the breath of his desire, unclouded by the mists of fear and hope. It bends above the strife of love with death. It bends above the strife of love with death. It keeps for her privilege of pain. A greatness in thy daughter's soul resides that can transform herself and all around, but must cross on stones of suffering to its goal. Although designed like a nectar cup of heaven, of heavenly ether made, she sought this air. She too must share the human need of grief, and all her cause of joy transmute to pain. The mind of mortal man is led by words. His sight retires behind the walls of thought and looks out only through half-opened doors. He cuts the boundless truth into sky strips, and every strip he takes for all the heavens. He stares at infinite possibility and gives to the plastic vast the name of chance. He sees the long results of an all-wise force, planning a sequence of steps in endless time, but in its links imagines a senseless chain, or the dead hand of cold necessity. He answers not to the mystic mother's heart, misses the ardent heavings of her breast, and feels cold, rigid limbs of lifeless law, the will of the timeless, working out in time, in the free absolute steps of cosmic truth. He thinks a dead machine or unconscious fate. A magician's formulas have made matter's laws, and while they last, all things by them are bound. But the spirit's consent is needed for each act, and freedom walks in the same pace with law. So Narad here explains clearly to Ashwapati. He says it seems like a magician's formulas have made matter's law, and it looks like a dead machine, or fate seems to be unconscious because it seems not to heed the mortal prayer. It does not bother about what our own desires and our own prayers are. But however, fate is not like that, he says. But instead, for each act, the the spirit's consent is required. The spirit has to agree somewhere. The fate cannot act without the spirit's consent. It can certainly act without the mind's consent and without the emotional desire's consent. It can act without the outer consciousness's ignorant consent, but it cannot act without your spirit's consent. That is a very important, deep, occult truth that is being said here. That unless somewhere you have agreed to accept or to do what is happening to you, it cannot happen. So if you've decided not to die, you cannot die. And therefore you have these strange paradoxes of certain people in awful accidents, alive, and the other one dead, in the same accident, in the same place. So the spirit's consent somewhere is required. A magician's formulas have made matter's laws, and while they last, all things by them are bound, but the spirit's consent is needed for each act, and freedom walks in the same pace with law. So there is a determination, there is a law that governs things. However, there is also freedom. So this question of, am I free or am I bound? Am I bound by a karmic or a destiny that is predetermined, or do I have freedom? So he says, at every moment, freedom and law, determination walk together. And while they last, all things by them are bound, but the spirit's consent is needed for each act, and freedom walks in the same pace with law. All here can change if the magician choose. Now the magician here is with a capital M. So a magician is not the ordinary magician that we're talking about. All here can change if the magician choose. If human will could be made one with God's. If human thought could echo the thoughts of God, man might be all-knowing and omnipotent. So if his human will could be made one with God's, the God, magician here is referring to the divine, another aspect. Seems like he's a magician. So, if human will could be made one with God's, if human thought could echo the thoughts of God, so if one could be in consonance with the highest divine will of one's own destiny or of the world's destiny, then one would be all-knowing and omnipotent. Man might be all-knowing and omnipotent. But now he walks in nature's doubtful ray. Yet can the mind of man receive God's light? The instrument of the mind is a receiver. It's an organizer and receiver. And therefore the mind of man can receive God's light. That means can receive a higher consciousness. God's light is a way of saying that can receive deeper, higher intimation, can receive God's light. The force of man can be driven by God's force. Then is he a miracle doing miracles. So then he becomes the magician. Who? The man, humanity, each one of us. Then is he a miracle doing miracles. For only so can he be nature's king. So if man has to become nature's king, if the humanity has to become, or each one of us has to become, above the law of fate and determination, then one has to become, then one has to be the miracle doing miracles and open the mind to a higher light and a higher force and become one with the will and thought of the magician, God. Okay? For only so can he be nature's king. It is decreed and Satyavan must die. So then after all this, suddenly he comes up with this one line that will hit the solar plexus of both the father and mother of Savitri and Savitri herself, and he says it out at last. Now, he was avoiding saying this one sentence. So we've read about 10 pages of this, but Narada has so far never said it. Suddenly he says, in the middle of this wonderful philosophic argument, it is decreed and Satyavan must die. It is decreed means it has already been decided, foreseen, that he must die. Now you'll ask, where is free will and fate? Of course, you see Savitri and you have read it, so you know where free will and fate are. So, it is decreed and Satyavan must die. The hour is fixed. The hour is even fixed, means exact time of his death. The hour is fixed, chosen, the fatal stroke, even the last fatal moment of how he dies has been chosen. The hour is fixed, chosen, the fatal stroke. What else shall be is written in her soul. So what else after that will happen is written in Savitri's soul. What else shall be is written in her soul. But till the hour reveals the fateful script, the writing waits illegible and mute. So till the hour reveals that fateful script, that what is written in Savitri's soul, the writing waits illegible, nobody can read it, and it is quiet, mute. The writing waits illegible and mute. Fate is truth. What is fate? Again, another definition of fate. Narad is saying, what is fate? Ashwapati's definition of fate, we just read. What is fate? Naran's definition is, fate is truth working out in ignorance. So another definition of fate. Fate is truth working out in ignorance. O king, addresses Ashwapati, O king, thy fate is a transaction made at every hour between nature and thy soul, with God for its foreseeing arbiter. Fate is a balance drawn in destiny's book. Now this is very interesting. Fate is a balance drawn in destiny's book. Book of accounts, fate is the balance drawn in destiny's book. So, and it is a transaction made between, O king, your fate is a transaction that you're doing at every hour between nature and your soul, with God for its foreseeing arbiter. Fate is drawn in destiny's book. Man can accept his fate. He can refuse. Man can accept his fate. He can refuse. Even if the one maintains the unseen decree, he writes thy refusal in thy credit page. So imagine a book, a ledger, accounts book, and there he is. Man can accept his fate, he can refuse. Even if the one maintains the unseen decree, he writes thy refusal in thy credit page. For doom is not a close, a mystic seal, arisen from the tragic crash of life, arisen from the body's torture and death. The spirit rises, mightier by defeat. Its godlike wings grow wider with each fall. Its splendid failures sum to victory. So he says that doom is not a close, a mystic seal. Because each time that one rises from the tragic events of life, rises from the body's torture and of death, the spirit rises mightier by defeat. Its godlike wings grow wider with each fall. Its splendid failures sum to victory. O man, the events that meet thee on thy road, though they smite thy body and soul with joy and grief, are not thy fate. They touch thee a while and pass. Even death can cut not short thy spirit's walk. O man, he says, the events that meet you on your road, on your journey of life, though they smite your body and soul with joy and grief, are not your fate. They touch you for a while and pass. Even death can cut not short thy spirit's walk. Thy goal, the road thou choosest, are thy fate. Instead, the goal that you have chosen are your fate. They touch thee a while and pass. Even death cannot cut short your spirit's walk. Thy goal, the road thou choosest, are thy fate. On the altar, throwing thy thoughts, thy heart, thy works, thy fate is a long sacrifice to the gods, till they have opened to thee thy secret self, and made thee one with the indwelling God. So, on the altar, means the altar of life, you will be throwing your thoughts, your heart, your works. So, Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. In these three words, all the three yogas are written. Can you see them? Recognize them? On the altar, throwing thy thoughts. But you have a choice. You can do these yogas unconsciously, like 99.9% of us are doing. Or you can choose to do these yogas consciously. But you will have to do them. That sacrifice, that human sacrifice that each of us are making is only a small portion of the divine holocaust and sacrifice that the divine made coming down into this ignorant earth. So we are only representatives of him, and our spirit is going through that sacrifice. That altar, that sacredness, that sacrifice is not in a bad sense of the word. Making sacred your life is what sacrifice means. So that making sacred of your life is something that you will have to do, Narad says. Whether you like it or not. The choice is not whether you do it or not. The choice is whether you're consciously doing it or unconsciously doing it. So, though they smite thy body and soul with joy and grief, O man, the events that meet thee on thy road, though they smite thy body and soul with joy and grief, are not thy fate. They touch thee a while and pass. Even death can cut not short thy spirit's walk. Thy goal, the road thou choosest, are thy fate. On the altar throwing thy thoughts, thy heart, thy works. Thoughts is Dhyana Yoga. Heart is Jnana Yoga. Heart is Bhakti Yoga. Works is Karma Yoga. On the altar throwing thy thoughts, thy heart, thy works. Thy fate is a long sacrifice to the gods, till they have opened to thee thy secret self. And this will continue on. You will have to do this life after life, maybe for 1,000 lives, maybe for 1,000,000 lives, over millennia, till they have opened through this sacrifice, till they have opened to thee thy secret self, till your spirit, your soul comes in front as the governor and leader of your life, till you become conscious of your soul, of your true soul, the divine in you. So till then, this sacrifice and this offering on the altar will continue. So, thy goal, the road thou choosest, are thy fate. On the altar throwing thy thoughts, thy heart, thy works, thy fate is a long sacrifice to the gods, till they have opened to thee thy secret self, and made thee one with the indwelling God. So till you have become one with the God that is within you. O soul, intruder in nature's ignorance, armed traveller to the unseen supernal heights, thy spirit's fate is a battle and ceaseless march against invisible opponent powers, a passage from matter into timeless self. So who is speaking here? Narad. Been talking to Ashwapati, isn't it? Fate is truth working out in ignorance. O king, thy fate is a transaction made, and so on. So, he says, adventurer through blind, unforeseeing time, a forced advance through a long line of lives, it pushes its spearhead through the centuries. So who is this adventurer through blind, unforeseeing time? It's the spirit. The spirit's fate is a battle and ceaseless march. So this is talking to the soul of man. Each of us are psychic being or soul that travels from life to life. So Narad says, O soul, and he's referring here to the soul of Ashwapati. O soul, intruder in nature's ignorance, because the soul enters into ignorant nature. Thy spirit's fate is a battle and ceaseless march against invisible opponent powers, a passage from matter into timeless self. Adventurer through blind, unforeseeing time, a forced advance through a long line of lives. the beautiful sentence, a forced advance. Why is it forced? A forced advance through a long line of lives. It pushes its spearhead through the centuries. Who pushes its spearhead? What pushes it? The soul in man, your soul, the psychic being. It is a forced advance because the body dies, the psychic then reincarnates into another body, you understand? So it pushes its spearhead through the centuries, across the dust and mire of the earthly plane. On many guarded lines and dangerous fronts, in dire assaults, in wounded slow retreats, holding the ideal's ringed and battered fort, or fighting against odds in lonely posts, or camped in night around the bivouac's fires, awaiting the tardy trumpets of the dawn, in hunger and in plenty and in pain, through peril and through triumph and through fall, through life's green lanes and over her desert sands, up the bald moor, along the sunlit ridge, in serried columns, with a straggling rear, led by its nomad vanguard's signal fires, marches the army of the way-lost God. So this is the journey that the psychic being and the soul of man, of each of us, goes through from life to life. So here it marches up the bald moor. It's almost like a physical description. Then marches the army of the way-lost God. Then late the joy ineffable is felt. Then he remembers his forgotten self. He has refound the skies from which he fell. At length his front's indomitable line forces the last passes of the ignorance, advancing beyond nature's last known bounds, reconnoitering the formidable unknown. Beyond the landmarks of things visible, it mounts through a miraculous upper air, till climbing the mute summit of the world, he stands upon the splendor peaks of God. So here is this wonderful description that Narad is speaking to Ashwapati and explaining how the journey of the soul takes place, how from life to life the body, its march through life, and how the soul then tries to find itself in matter and making matter conscious. Then at the end of this he says, suddenly in the middle of this description of the journey of the soul and the battle of man, he says, in vain thou mournest that Satyavan must die. This one line suddenly jumps up from this wonderful philosophy. In vain thou mournest that Satyavan must die. Have you understood what he's trying to say? So he's trying to tell Ashwapati that, look, and the queen, that your mourning that Satyavan will die and Savitri will be without a husband and all of this, that he's not going to live, is in vain. Why? Because everybody has to die. And everybody is reborn. The soul doesn't die. It is reborn in a long lines of life. So in a way, through this, and Narad, is known for his special powers of persuasion and divine deception, as you call it. So he says to him that don't worry, that's part of it. That's why you should not mourn that Satyavan will die, because I've just given you this high philosophy of how all souls die. You understand? And are reborn. So soul does not die, the body dies. So what is going to die is Satyavan's body, not his soul. That's what he's trying to tell Ashwapati. But the way he does it, you see the long paragraph of philosophy, and then suddenly one simple line, in vain. Now you look at the artistry of the poet. Who is the poet here? Sri Aurobindo. To write like this. You can imagine how he is depicted through this poem, just this one paragraph, the character of Narad. You've read the character of Narad in many, many books. So he has depicted that character through the most sublime English mystic poetry, and yet nothing that he's saying, that Narad is saying, is untrue or false or wrong or incorrect. It's absolutely spot on. But the way he does it is what Sri Aurobindo is showing. That's the poet's masterful way of writing. That's how you have to appreciate English poetry. That's why the genius of Sri Aurobindo comes through. Just as a poet, forget about him as anything else. So, try and understand, get the nuances of what I'm reading. So, till climbing the mute summit of the world, he stands upon the splendor peaks of God. In vain thou mournest that Satyavan must die. His death is a beginning of greater life. So he tells Ashwapati, see, his death is a beginning of greater life. Death is the spirit's opportunity. Now there's nothing untrue in what he's saying. It's profound, it's deep, it's mystical. And yet, the way that Narad has used philosophy to convince the parents of Savitri that marry your daughter to somebody who will die in 1 year. Okay? This is the story of Satyavan and Savitri. So, you can imagine. Now as a father, you've been told that your daughter is going to get married and the husband is going to die in 1 year. In vain thou mournest that Satyavan must die. His death is a beginning of greater life. Death is the spirit's opportunity. A vast intention has brought two souls close. Here again he is speaking a deep truth. Truth veiled in truth, veiled in truth, veiled in truth. Okay? A vast intention has brought two souls close, and love and death conspire towards one great end. So those who know what happens in Savitri, what Narad is saying is absolutely true. A vast intention has brought two souls close, and love and death conspire towards one great end. For out of danger and pain, heaven bliss shall come. So once again the importance of pain. For out of danger and pain, heaven bliss shall come. Time's unforeseen event, God's secret plan. This world was not built with random bricks of chance. A blind God is not destiny's architect. So this world was not built by random bricks of chance. A blind God is not destiny's architect. A conscious power has drawn the plan of life. There is a meaning in each curve and line. It is an architecture high and grand, by many named and nameless masons built, in which unseeing hands obey the unseen, and of its master builders, she is one. Who? So, what Narad is saying here, and through Narad Ashwapati, through Narad Sri Aurobindo, is, in especially the last paragraph, again it's a very strong statement about the importance of the fact that the world was not built by random bricks of chance. There is a higher conscious power, a supernature that guides the world. That supernature is what he's referring to as she. Now that supernature is not nature, it's not ignorant nature. Okay? Nature is nature, and Divine Mother is an embodiment of that nature. So Savitri is also an embodiment of that. So you could say, and of the master builders, and in which unseeing hands obey the unseen, and of its master builders she is one. Now in a way, she is referring to a supernature, but also could refer to the soul of Savitri, because she is also part of that supernature. Her soul has come down for a work. Now these are subtle occult things, you'll have to understand them a little deeply. I don't want to constrict this thing, but I think it's more than, here it's a larger picture that he's drawing, not an individual one. Yeah. Queen, strive no more to change the secret will. So then he now turns to the queen. From Ashwapati, he looks to the Queen Mother and says, Queen, strive no more to change the secret will. The secret will that nature, the supernature, that the whole divine plan, so to speak, has. Strive no more to change the secret will. Time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. So even time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. Bring not thy brief and helpless human tears across the fathomless moments of a heart that knows its single will and God's as one. So don't bring your helpless human tears across the fathomless moments of a heart that knows its single will and God's as one. It can embrace its hostile destiny. Here he's referring to Savitri. It can embrace its hostile destiny. This will, the single will, which knows itself as one with God's will, with the divine plan, with the intention of supernature, that will can embrace its hostile destiny. It sits apart with grief and facing death, affronting adverse fate, armed and alone. So it affronts adverse fate, armed and alone. So who was armed and alone? Savitri. In this enormous world, standing apart, in the mightiness of her silent spirit's will, in the passion of her soul of sacrifice, her lonely strength facing the universe, affronting fate, asks not man's help nor God's. So here, in the mightiness of her silent spirit's will, in the passion of her soul of sacrifice. Because you remember Savitri said, I have chosen, I shall not choose again. Just before that, you remember she says that to her mother. When her mother says, give up Satyavan, don't marry him. She says, I have chosen, I shall not, my soul is chosen, I shall not choose again. I will marry him. So that's why Narad is referring to Savitri and saying that her will is one with the divine's will. And it knows what it wants to do. And it is going to confront adverse fate. And it is going to confront destiny. So let her go her way. She knows what she's doing. So, now you understand? So, sometimes one life is charged with earth's destiny. So Narad hints. Sometimes, he says, one life is charged with earth's destiny. It cries not for succor from the time-bound bars. Alone she is equal to her mighty task. Intervene not in a strife too great for thee, a struggle too deep for mortal thought to sound, its question to its nature's rigid bounds, when the soul fronts nude of garbs the infinite. It's too vast theme of a lonely mortal will, pacing the silence of eternity. As a star, unaccompanied, moves in heaven, unastonished by the immensities of space, travelling infinity by its own light, the great are strongest when they stand alone. So here again, Narad is telling the Queen Mother, the great are strongest when they stand alone. So Savitri has decided to stand alone against the adverse fate that the destiny of Satyavan has already been seen to be. So, the great are strongest when they stand alone. A God-given might of being is their force. A God-given might of being is their force. A ray from self-solitude of light, the guide. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. This is a very, very, very important statement. A soul that can live alone with itself meets God. So that ability to be self-reliant and live alone with itself meets God. If you see throughout all ages, spiritual disciplines, you've always seen that those who want to go deeper into understanding the soul need to have a certain isolation, a certain ability to live with themselves and not be always in need of other people, other things, and whatever. So here, in a way, what Narad is telling Ashwapati, Queen Mother, is about Savitri's nature. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. Its lonely universe is their rendezvous. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left sole to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge. So a day may come, in a sense, he is hinting to what will happen later. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left sole to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge. Alone with death and close to extinction's edge, her single greatness in that dire scene must cross alone a perilous bridge in time and reach an apex of world destiny, where all is won or all is lost for man. In that tremendous silence, lone and lost, of a deciding hour in the world's fate, in her soul's climbing beyond mortal time, when she stands soul with death or soul with God, when she stands soul with death or soul with God, please notice, because we know who death is now. He is a disguise of. When she stands soul with death or soul with God, apart upon a silent, desperate brink, alone with herself and death and destiny, as on some verge between time and timelessness, when being must end or life rebuild its base, alone she must conquer or alone must fall. No human aid can reach her in that hour. No armored God stands shining at her side. Cry not to heaven, for she alone can save. For this the silent force came missioned down. For this the silent force came missioned down. In her the conscious will took human shape. She only can save herself and save the world. O Queen, stand back from that stupendous scene. Come not between her and her hour of fate. Her hour must come, and none can intervene. Think not to turn her from her heaven-sent task. Strive not to save her from her own high will. Thou hast no place in that tremendous strife. Thy love and longing are not arbiters there. Leave the world's fate and her to God's sole guard. Even if he seems to leave her to her lone strength, even though all falters and falls and sees an end, and the heart fails and only our death and night, God, given her strength, can battle against doom. Even on a brink where death alone seems close, and no human strength can hinder or can help, think not to intercede with the hidden will. Intrude not twixt her spirit and its force, but leave her to her mighty self and fate. There ends the quotation marks, and Narad stops speaking. There ends her fate. Intrude not twixt her spirit and its force, but leave her to her mighty self and fate. He spoke and ceased and left the earthly scene. Away from the strife and suffering on our globe, he turned towards his far-off blissful home, a brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven. So he starts moving away back to his own home, leaves the earth. You can see Narad moving up. Have you seen that photograph? Okay. So he turned towards his far-off blissful home, a brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven. The luminous body of the ethereal seer assailed the purple glory of the noon and disappeared like a receding star, vanishing into the light of the unseen. But still a cry was heard in the infinite, and still to the listening soul on mortal earth, a high and far, imperishable voice chanted the anthem of eternal love. And still to the listening soul on mortal earth, a high and far, imperishable voice chanted the anthem of eternal love. So you could hear Narad singing, and even though he had left, you couldn't see him. You could hear his musical chant, and the music, that is the music of the spheres. Something else, that music. You have to listen to it. And that chant, and he was singing of the anthem of eternal love. That is what Narad was singing as he moved away. And that could be heard to the listening soul on earth, even when he moved away. That's how Sri Aurobindo ends this book. This is the end of Canto 2, end of Book 6. How many cantos does Book 6 have? 2. So we go to Book 7, the Book of Yoga.